fellow Star Trek fans, welcome back to a brand new episode of the Clonestar podcast. I am joined once again this week by my wonderful friend Jodie Pickens. Jodie, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to talk to our guests today.
Are you Trektastic?
I am Trektastic.
Good.
Absolutely.
That's the main thing. So talking about our guests then, this week we are delighted to welcome a very special guest to the show, an actor, musician, writer, producer whose career spans film, television, theatre, and the blues clubs of Canada. You might recognise him from Blind Spot, Titans, Clarice, The Lost Symbol, Grand Army, Prosser, and the rest of it. But of course, we know him best as the War College Chancellor Kelrec in Starfleet Academy. We are absolutely thrilled to welcome Raoul Bhaneja to the show. Raoul, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thank you, Mike. And I'm going to correct you on how you say my name.
I apologize if I screwed up.
Because I realized before we started, everyone says, okay, let me just check. How do I pronounce your last name? But I liked it. It had you had sort of a bold assuredness to it, which I really appreciated. And just so you know, when you have a last name like mine, which even Indian people find hard to pronounce, I take no offense to it. So please, you have not at all offended, but it's pronounced Bhaneja.
Bhaneja. Okay, there we are.
Yeah. But, when I talk to Americans, Jodie might get this, a lot of people think my name is Bhaneja.
Yes.
Because they think it's Spanish. But in fact, I'm pretty sure it's a spelling that my grandfather made up when it had to be written down in English. So it has kind of a semi-silent H, which is really what freaks anybody. When you put a B and an H together to start the thing off, you can just, let alone you have a first name that has three vowels in a row, R-A-O-U, ow. So listen, I basically hear, for my whole life, I basically heard, and I basically just nod. Yep, that's me.
Me.
I heard an R, I heard an A somewhere, probably me. So
the worst bit is,
Mike, I'm sorry. What a way to start.
The worst bit is you put a video out on socials last week saying, this is how you say my name. And I must have watched it about a dozen times and I still got it wrong. So we're doing well.
And in fact, you know what? There's really more than one way to say my name, because my mother, my close relatives have always pronounced my first name like you might in the UK, Mike, which is Raoul.
Yeah.
Raoul.
Mm.
And when I was growing up, and particularly when I became an actor and I started saying, oh, my name's Raoul, people were like, Robin? Roger? Like, what? And so then I basically had to start going, it's Raoul. Okay, it's Raoul. And then everyone's like, oh, Raoul. So in fact, it's probably Raoul, but let's not go there. I don't want this.
From now
on. That was a podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. Good night.
From now on, it will be Raoul. I make sure of it. Don't worry. I have to first off compliment you on your hoodie.
Well, I wore it especially for you. When you,
Nice.
The FOMO and the jealousy is most certainly real because.
Hey, I've got more, but I don't make a habit of walking the streets in it because, as an actor, you have to, exercise some level of humility. It can also be seen as great desperation if you walk around a grocery store or an airport just full in Star Trek paraphernalia and people are like, yeah, I wonder who that guy is.
Yeah, I mean, Jodie and I are most certainly not.
We're not.
No, you're fans. You're supposed to wear it. I'm the guy on it. If I'm wearing, I can still be a fan, but if I walk around covered in Starfleet Academy gack, it's kind of like, well, what, like, are you that desperate to be recognized? And I am, but I have to try to exercise some restraint.
I was going to say, it's not like you're walking around with a teapot, is it? Come on.
No, sure. But I am drinking tea.
Exactly.
So
Yes.
I'm a cliche. I'm a walking cliche.
That's the Britishness in you.
Exactly,
So, I tell you what then, let's start right at the very beginning. You are Manchester born, raised in Ottawa, to Indian, Sindhi, and Irish roots. Now, that is a real mishmash, but it's a really cool mishmash. So, starting off then, was your household very creative?
Not professionally. There are no real professional artists in my family. My mother grew up in Dublin after the war in a working class family in Rathgar neighborhood of Dublin, and above the bookies in the off license. That's where I spent much of my youth when visiting. And my dad came from kind of a working class, middle class family in Delhi. But my Irish grandfather, who I'd never met, sadly, he had been involved in the Dublin, like in operatic societies in Dublin as an amateur. And my Irish grandfather had been involved in putting on plays and cultural activities for and representing the Sindhi community in Delhi. Because Delhi, Sindh is now part of Pakistan.
Yep.
But before the partition of India, when it was all one big country, before the British had great ideas to, help chop it up.
Yeah,
Let's not
we
go
had
there.
lots of great.
that.
I mean, we're eternally
Yeah.
sorry.
No, and I get it. But so when the Sindhi community was being represented in Delhi, my grandfather was involved in, concerts and plays and talking, because most Sindhis who came to Delhi in the post-partition era in the late 40s were refugees. They had come from mostly people who were Hindu, left Sindh and came to India, as many people who were Muslim left India and went to Pakistan. And you can look it up, Google it, or watch that Attenborough movie Gandhi if you want to get an idea of what that period was like. So, yeah, but I never really had professional artists, but I definitely had, people who were interested in culture and in music. My mom was always singing, going around the house. That's one of the reasons I'm sure I'm a musician. And, but no, I didn't have any like professional show business in my family.
Hang on a second. You're not just a musician. You're an award-winning musician.
Sure. I've won a thing called a Maple Blues Award, which is a Canadian Blues Award. It's not quite a Grammy or our Juno. Our Juno is the Canadian music award that's like the Grammy. But yeah, I've had a blues band called Raoul in the Big Time. Another reason why I go by Raoul, not Raoul in the Big Time. I've had that band. We just had our 28th anniversary show a couple weeks ago in Toronto. And so, I've played music for pretty much as long as I've been an actor. They've kind of gone hand in hand almost throughout my life from when I was a kid. I was always sort of doing a little bit of both, and yeah.
When did that start then for you? Like, when did that kind of acting or performance bug take form?
Well, I was always one of those kids who, when I had people's attention around the Christmas tree, when family would be over, I'd always be doing little weird sketches or impressions or voices or accents. And, we had a bit of a Christmas concert tradition in our house around the tree. People would show up and the kids would do different dumb things. And so I had an audience there. I was the youngest of two. So I think as the younger sibling too, I kind of needed to get attention. So I'm sure some of that was that. And then when I was growing up, on top of all of that, I grew up in Germany, West Germany, for a number of years. And one of my teachers, her husband Tim, was an ex paratrooper, and he was a great guy, really cool guy. And he was a guy who had all kinds of musical instruments. He wasn't really great, like he wasn't amazing at any of them. He wasn't professional, but he was a guy who had all these different instruments. And I remember once I saw a black harmonica on his bookshelf, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool. What's that?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, it's a harmonica." So I went, and he said, "Oh, you can blow on it if you want." And so I tried out his harmonica, and he basically said, "Yeah, you can have it." And that was it. Like when I think about it now, it's like I've spent my entire life playing harmonica. That's the lead instrument I play when I perform. I've been playing it for 40 years. And it pretty much is because, a nice person said, yeah, just keep it, fiddle around with it. He basically said, like, I can't get much sound out of it. Good luck.
Yeah, talk about a really easy instrument to learn as well.
Yeah, and also my brother was learning guitar and still is probably a better guitar player than I am. So I needed to have an instrument that I could show off on where there weren't as many people who were good at it. And that's still basically my theory. People are like, "Oh wow, you play amazing harmonica," and I'm like, "Yeah, because you don't know many harmonica players. That's why." But then I fell in love with blues music because blues was the music that so much harmonica is in. Yeah. And then once I started listening to blues music, then I was completely bitten by the blues bug, as we say. And I was, I just became a blues fan, and then later in my life, a musician because of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So at what point then did you go, I'm going to give acting a buzz? Was it a school thing? Was it after school? Where does that kind of fit in?
Well, when I was growing up in Germany, I got cast in 2 school plays. We were a very small school. It was at the time it was called BEPS, the British Embassy Preparatory School. It was one of the 2 English schools that were in Bonn, West Germany, and at that time Bonn was the capital of West Germany before they moved back to Berlin. And so we were a small school, and they put on plays, and I got fun parts in both plays in like my last years being there. That's like elementary school age, probably 6th grade and 7th grade. And I'd heard in Ottawa, which is the town I grew up in Canada, which is the capital, there was an arts high school there called Canterbury. And a family friend was over and said, "Oh, there's this arts high school in Ottawa, and if you're moving back at the end of this posting," my dad worked for the Canadian government. He was in the embassy in Bonn. They said, "Oh, if you're moving back to Ottawa, you should check out this high school because it's just started and they have an arts programming where you can specialize in dance and visual art and music and drama." And it was one of the few schools like that in Canada that was in the public system. And by public, I mean here public is means for everyone, as opposed to a private school, which means you pay for it. So I auditioned for it when I came back to Canada, and I got into it. And then really it was basically being in an arts high school that kind of solidified my passion for acting. And I was also around people playing music all the time. And, when you're young and you don't know anything, your buddy has a band and you go, "Oh, I want to have a band too." And your buddy's a musician and you go, "I could do that." I mean, I couldn't be a concert violinist. Those people, I knew I couldn't do what they did because that was a whole other level. But, a guy who picked up a guitar and yelled into a microphone, I was like, how hard could that be? So, and
you was a harmonica yelling into a microphone. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, for me, high school was very formative in terms of believing I could possibly become a professional performer, and also being surrounded by people who also believe that, and just being in an environment where it wasn't that strange, to want to do that. I wasn't like some kid who was the only person like that is in his or her entire high school. So that for me was really important. And then I was very lucky that when I finished high school, I got into the National Theatre School of Canada, which is kind of like our RADA or our Juilliard or whatever.
Yeah.
So I had thought maybe I would go to uni and study English or drama and then try to go into that. But because I got into that conservatory right after high school, I went straight into that. And then when I finished that after 3 years, I went right into the profession. And that's how I've been doing it for 30 years, despite being 35 years old.
It's magic how that
I'm
works.
50. I'm 51. I'm 51. So, but I was able to. I started I wasn't a child actor, but I started as a professional actor quite young in my life, and I've just sort of been doing it ever since. And my band almost as long.
So, what were your early inspirations then?
Well, in high school, I had been recruited by some friends of mine who were a couple years older, who were just at the beginning of their university years. And I was in a street theater company called Company of Fools, and we performed scenes from Shakespeare on the street for change.
Nice.
Which was kind of crazy, but we were, in the summer times in our hometown, 6 or 7 of us with a tickle trunk and our puffy shirts would go out and do scenes from, Scottish play, Midsummer's Night Dream, all kinds of shows, and Henry V, and we would perform those in like a cycle that would probably run 35 minutes. Then we take a little break. That crowd would leave, and then we'd perform it again. And so that was pretty cool because I really loved Shakespeare, and I got to noodle around on these great parts as just a kid, not knowing anything.
Yeah.
And it also introduced this idea to me that it was great to make stuff for people that was accessible, and that was not, you were performing Shakespeare in that circumstance, not, in the Barbican or at the Kennedy Center or whatever, you were doing it while people were eating hot dogs on their lunch break from work.
Yep.
And when I later got to work at Shakespeare's Globe in London in 2002, so kind of like a decade after that started, it helped sort of solidify some of those ideas that, oh yeah, wow, Shakespeare's theater was also very much a public exercise, not an academic one, not one that was exclusively for elite people. Of course, elite people saw Shakespeare's plays, but so did regular folks. Mm-hmm. So I think in some ways I then really started to enjoy and believe that it was great to make art and perform for regular folks in regular spaces and just trying to tell people interesting stories. So in some ways, when I play blues or I do Shakespeare or I do a play or I make a TV show, it's still basically, essentially it's telling people a story, whichever medium it's in. And I kind of consider myself something more like a storyteller or a performer than I call myself actor or blues man or whatever. I don't think of it too much. They're not that separate to me. It's all kind of the same thing.
Yeah. Well,
do you think that's what drew you to blues music? Is the storytelling aspect? Because of all those genres like jazz and blues and in that area, blues is definitely the storyteller of that
100%.
Of that group. And I wonder if that was part of the draw, besides the harmonica features. Yes.
No, I think so. And also, those people who originated the form popularly, the African American innovators that were Muddy Waters, Little Walter, Howlin' Wolf, really the stars of the post-war period in Chicago. They'd all migrated. Most of them had migrated from the South, had come up to the city of Chicago and kind of created this sound. It was intoxicating music to be exposed to because you'd never heard anything like it. And I would say, one of the interesting things about Sinners is that Sinners, the movie, has kind of exposed a whole new generation of people to that real origin blues sound, and it's fun for me because a new generation of people are going, hey, that's cool. It doesn't have baggage of the past, like there was a time when blues kind of went out of fashion. A lot of the African American community didn't really celebrate it because it was kind of like old folks music and sort of like country music and kind of square. I mean, they had Miles Davis, they had James Brown, and on and on and on. And, these white kids show up and are like, I like old people country music, and I think it sort of gone out of style. And now I'm like, oh no, this is really cool. There's young African-American people who are embracing it as kind of part of North America's cultural history. And now blues has become this music that's like all over the world that so many of us have fallen in love with. And it's really come from these innovators. But for me, so much of blues is, if you're singing it, is in the first person. I woke up this morning and my baby is gone. I mean, you could basically, those are monologues.
Yeah.
A lot of blues is first person delivery, like a monologue. So I think as an actor and a performer, like those always made sense to me. Sometimes like more poetic music that was kind of more abstract, I wasn't really drawn to in terms of singing it. But this stuff is so direct. And again, it's basically, when I've seen the greatest blues performers of all time, when I've had those rare opportunities, they are always looking into the audience's eyes and they're always talking to them, not at them. They're not like closing their eyes and like backing away from the audience or giving the audience the finger. No, it's like, this is my thing and I'm here to share it with you. And I'm telling you something. So I've always found that so compelling and not that different from any of the other stuff I do. Ideally you're trying to engage people with the creative act that you are involved in, and that's kind of what keeps me going.
Yeah.
So you've left school and
I graduated, Mike. I mean, I didn't leave it. I graduated.
You graduated school. We don't say that in the UK. You leave school. So you graduated school. Obviously, you said you've had your band for as nearly as long as you've been acting. What was the first thing that happened after you've graduated school?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I got a job. Well, I got 2 jobs in the last 4 months of my training that really set me on my path. One was like 30 years ago this month. I got cast in a Canadian TV show called The Newsroom, not the famous American Newsroom. This was much before that. It was like a situation comedy, kind of in the Larry David sort of like docu behind the scenes thing, made by this Canadian guy, Ken Finkelman, who wrote on the Airplane movies and did like pretty interesting stuff. And it was sort of a behind the scenes mockumentary about a news channel.
Yep.
And I got to do a little guest star part on that, which my school let me go take a few days off and go do, which they didn't usually let you do. But
They
they
can't
let
say
me.
no when it's a like a network TV show. They can't say no, can they?
Sure, they can. They can say like, "Are you here to be an actor or not?" We are
Yes,
not- are
I'm
you-
off to go and act.
Exactly. We have television? No. We're here for the theater. But the reason they let me go is I got the part through an audition showcase that my school had brought us to. So it wasn't like I was out trolling for work, because their thing was, look, the day you finish, you will spend the rest of your life trying to get a job. Go for it. But when we're here, we don't want everyone auditioning and leaving and going out. No, this is when you train and this is when you go. But so that ended up being kind of amazing because I hadn't even left school and I had 1 credit in Canadian television. You know, that was a starting point. And at the same time, a friend of mine in my class, her father is a legendary Canadian theater director named Paul Thompson, who started the collective theater movement in Canada. He created a show in the 1970s, early 70s, which is very historic in Canadian theater, called The Farm Show. And shows like it have happened. And in fact, they toured The Farm Show to the UK in the 70s as well. But basically, it was in the early 70s, a group of actors went and lived in a local farming community, interviewed the farmers, met them, lived there, and then over 6 weeks, improvised a play that they created about that community and put it on for them. And that was called The Farm Show. And in Canada at the time, that was very innovative because most of the plays we did in 1970 were plays that had been written in America or had been written in Britain.
Yep.
And so this was kind of like some of the earliest forms of like Canadians telling stories for Canadians. And if you flip through any grant book or any government program today, you'll still see that that's basically the thing we keep saying, you know, and it's because, of course, we come from a British tradition as a colony. So Britain is a huge influence on us. We live beside the most powerful country in the world that has this huge cultural imprint on the whole world, and particularly us who live right next door. When the president isn't threatening to invade us and make us their 51st state. But yeah, we're close. We're very close. So Canada finding its own voice has always been kind of a thing. So Paul created in his long career shows like this. So I got hired to go to this theater festival called the Blythe Festival, which for over 50 years has exclusively done Canadian original work in the summer times. So instead of doing the Fantastics and the Music Man, they're creating original summer shows. A place I've worked at and my wife's worked at in the years to follow. And I did a show called Barn Dance Live, which was a show about a country music live radio show that would tour around southwestern Ontario. And the people who were in it became local celebrities. They became like Grand Ole Opry, Nashville stars of this part of Ontario. And I had the great pleasure in 1996 when I was doing that show to be interviewing some of the legends who were still alive from this period, which was 1930s, 1940s.
Yep.
And I played one of the local stars, Ernie King, who was the bashful boy. That was his routine. You know, he did all the love songs. And he ended up being, it turns out, like, I thought I got the job because I was like this, you know, incredible actor, singer, guitar player. I was like, of course, I've been handpicked out of all the kids graduating school. And I show up to this little town and I'm living above the general store. And I go into the general store and the girl working at the counter goes, oh, I don't know. I mean, this is a town of 800 people, right? It's very small. She goes, oh, I haven't met you before. Who are you? And I said, oh, well, you know, I'm here to do a show across the street at the Blythe Festival. And she just looked at me and she said, oh, are you playing Ernie King? And I was like, well, how would she know that? And then, of course, I saw a picture of Ernie King and I was like, oh, my God, I look exactly like this guy.
So it's not because of your talent, it's just because you look like him.
No, and he ended up becoming a friend for many, many years until he passed away. But that was a really cool experience too, because that was, again, meeting real people, interviewing them, taking fragments of the interviews and then going back with actors and trying to improvise and create a story in a play that you ended up putting on for not just them, but for the whole theater community and the whole community from around that come to see it. But you were playing a real person who's sitting in front of you on opening night. And you're reflecting a version of them, which of course is only so accurate because it's a play. So I guess in some ways that also influenced me because I've always tried to hang on to that experience, that if I'm ever playing someone, even if it's, in the 32nd century in outer space on a franchise TV show, is that I always try to feel like that person is watching me. Like the real life Kelrec is watching me just offset. So I have to kind of fight to do him justice. That's kind of how I think about almost any role I play. That the real person is just over there looking at me going,
just out of eyesight and
yeah, is that real? Are you doing a good job? Are you proving, not so much like is your acting good or is your voice good? No, it's like, are you proving my point of view? Are you sticking up for my point of view? Which in a character like Kelrec, I think is kind of interesting because I would say he has a contrarian view to a lot of the other characters on the show.
Oh, yes. Well, we're going to talk more about that in a bit. But let's just briefly talk about your early stretch, because you had the newsroom. Then you had, 300 odd episodes of Train 48?
Yes.
What was that early stretch like? Because that is quite a lot to do for a young actor.
Well, Train 48 was this incredibly weird and great experience. It was based on an Australian format. I think it was called Going Home. Yep. And it was a daily improvised commuter soap opera. So you follow a group of characters every night as they take the train from work home. Out, and in our case, it was from the city of Toronto to the suburbs. Yep. Very common in the UK. People take the train all the time.
Oh, yes. I remember that journey well.
Yeah, exactly. And the really innovative and interesting, crazy thing about Train 48 was we shot it at 7 a.m. in the morning, and it was on TV that night at 3 p.m.
Wow.
We had paragraph scenarios of each scene and what we were supposed to do, but we improvised all the dialogue. That was the only way it could be made on that schedule. So we would be literally on the train, the fake train. It was actually two cameramen very Star Trek, two cameramen who did this all day long, just to make it look like the train was moving. We would one group of us each episode would literally have today's newspaper, and we would be talking over each other. This is 20 years ago when people read newspapers, and we'd be talking over each other and discussing today's news, and that would be on television that night. So that was a wild couple years. We did 4 or 5 episodes a week on and off over about a 2.5 year period, and that's how we did 318 half hours. And I was probably in 260 or 70 of them, and I directed one of them. And I have some friends from that who are still lifelong friends now. One of them being, if anyone watches, I'd say what the person who other people might know is, he plays Paul Sun-Young Lee. He's on The Last Airbender. Yep. He's in The Mandalorian. We spent many times improvising on a fake train together. Many.
Kim's Convenience.
Yes.
Come on, that's a great show.
I love that show.
Amazing. Yeah, great. Amazing. So yeah, Paul, before I remember I went to go see the very first run of Kim's Convenience. It was in a church during the Toronto Fringe Festival because it was a play first before it became a TV show.
Yep.
And he had told me, I'm a bit young for this part, but Ince Choi, who's this great writer, the guy who created it, basically the whole idea, based on his own family, Ince has written this part for me, and I've got to do it. Like, I really think I'm the right guy. And I was like, great, I can't wait to come see it. And it was like the second performance I showed up, there was a line around the block. And I was like, And then I went to go see it, and Paul was that guy. He was Appa, and he was amazing. And I thought, wow, this is where you see role meets actor, they fuse, and some magical thing happens. And Paul then spent years touring that show as a play all over Canada, even into the US. Then it was developed into a TV show. So by the time you guys started to see it, he'd been playing that character on and off for about 10 years, 8 years.
Yeah.
So he's just, and it just was in his bones. By the time you got to see it on TV, he knew
he was the character.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful guy.
So much of your early career then was really based around improv and live performance in a way. Even if you were behind a camera, it was, here's your 3 paragraphs on a train with cameras bouncing in front of you, right? I mean, but that has to be pretty impactful too, because I don't think a lot of people get those opportunities that early in their career or are trusted with that level of performance.
To improvise on television is still really, my friend Colin Mockery, of course, is known the world over for being one of the greatest improvisers on live television, from Whose Line Is It Anyway? But outside of that, improvisation on television is not really that much of a thing. So to have a chance to do it on TV was amazing. And then I did do some live, and actually in that great high school I went to, there is a thing still that runs called the Canadian High School Improv Games. And my school were gold medalists 2 of the years I was in high school when I was on the team. So even back in high school, I had kind of improv experience. Then I worked in improv making those plays through improvisation. So we weren't improvising in front of the audience, but we were using improv as a way of writing. Then I did long form improv in Toronto, where you would play a character for a whole season in what we call the soaps. They do them in Edmonton. There's a company still running doing it called Dynasty in Edmonton, which is hilarious and amazing. And if you're ever in Edmonton, Alberta, you have to go see Dynasty. And we had a version of that running in Toronto for a number of years. And then I got Train 48, and it was an amazing kind of experience. And even now on some of the shows I'm on, like there's a Canadian show on now that just premieres 3rd season tonight called The Trades, which is on a channel in Canada called Crave. And that's a scripted comedy, but it has all these amazing comedic actors on it. So there's improv slapping you in the face while you're rolling the whole time. There's always people wisecracking and making jokes and making little changes to the script. So yeah, I love improv. I have a few friends who are really masterful at it and are using it in really interesting ways and forms in the theater. So yeah, I consider myself, one of the things about my weird career is that I've done a lot of different things. As is evident. As much as I probably would have liked to have been in, say, Iron Man, the first one, and just kind of stayed in those movies since then, that would have been great. I'd be talking to you while flying in my private jet instead of my gray audition screen propped up against my bed in my bedroom. But, one of the pleasures of my weird career is that there has been such a tremendous amount of variety.
Oh, absolutely.
And for a weird Gemini like myself, maybe that's been essential to my survival.
Well, it's quite interesting because looking through your IMDb, probably I would say for me, it must have been like 2011, 2012, 2013. I was just left college at that point. I was working full time, and I would binge watch lots of random stuff on Sky as it was back then. And there are still shows that I go back to now. Like, I'm going to quote Flashpoint. I love that show. You're in 2 episodes. Warehouse 13, another great show.
Pilot. I'm in the pilot, baby.
Pilot, exactly. Rookie Blue, another great show. Nikita, another great show. And it's just like I go through and I look at like your earlier career. It's like, was there a week I watched something where you weren't in it? Because you're in most of the shows I was watching at the time. Saving Hope, another great one. So at what point then did you really go, okay, this is it. I'm doing this now for the rest of my life. I'm never going to stop doing this again.
I pretty much thought that was it. Probably the first day I went to theater school, honestly.
You never had any, there was never any kind of niggling down, because we've spoken to a lot of actors, and a lot of actors have the same, they always get this imposter syndrome. They always feel like they're never good enough, they're never going to succeed, and everything else. But they always prove that wrong because the characters that they portray are incredible. But there's always that doubt. Do you ever have that? Do you ever feel that problem? Have that problem as well? And we've spoken to actors that don't have that problem.
My problem is more that the world hasn't seen what I can do than I worry that I can't do it. Now, do I have days when I don't think I'm as good as I could be? Yes. Do I have to work my ass off to be better? 100%, 1000%.
Yep.
It's not arrogance in that way. I work very hard at what I do, but that's what all actors do. Like actors who aren't famous work very hard to do the job well. That's just what we have to do. And anyone who's been doing it as long as I am, like anybody who's left doing it after 30 years has definitely had some success and knows what they're doing, because you can't make any kind of living or try to have a family or try to own a house or do any of those crazy things if you do it for 30 years and you can't do that stuff. So I felt probably by the time I got to those shows you were talking about, like 2010, I pretty much felt like if you called me tomorrow and said you're in a movie with Al Pacino, I would have been like, great. Now, would I have been nervous on the first day with Al Pacino? Of course.
Absolutely.
Would I have said like, I'm not ready, I'm not worthy? I would have said, no, I am worthy, I am ready, and I want to do more of it. And frankly, I still feel like that today. I still feel like one of the fun things about the Star Trek job is it's one of those jobs where unless you're a uber television binger super nerd like Mike is, you might not be familiar with my work from Saving Hope or one episode of Rookie Blue. And so, Blind Spot was a show that a lot of people saw me on who hadn't seen me before. And to be on something like Star Trek is just an amazing opportunity for people to get to know what I do and what I can do. And you hope that, maybe someone in the wide world watching it who also makes TV or movies is like, oh, that guy, yeah, I like him. We should call him up to be on this thing, or maybe he should read for that thing. That opportunity of Star Trek is amazing. But of course, it's an impossible profession for your spirit and ego, because as you've heard, every single actor who comes on this thing, I'm sure, is like rejection is such a huge part of it. That's one of the reasons I've always tried to make my own opportunities, whether I produce my own theater or produce my own band or try to make shorts, or I'm currently developing a TV show that we're like pitching right now. Like I've always tried to do that stuff because that's a part of my creative life and my life that I have some control over.
Yep.
As an actor, particularly as you get a little higher up, like there's certain jobs I can't go do anymore because I've gotten to a certain level, So in some ways you can go longer without working. You can go longer stretches because you don't want to go backwards. And as long as you can afford it, which doesn't last too long, you try to sort of, you try to keep moving up this crazy ladder. And, you can look from reading the credits you read. Most of the Blind Spot wasn't, but previous to that, most of the shows I made were in Canada. Yep. Most of the shows I was on them because they were shot here, and I was a Canadian who was good enough to get on them. But those were also extremely hard shows to become the leads of because the leads were from other places. Yes. So there's a double-edged sword when you're kind of in the branch plant of international production that a city like Toronto can be. That's why I've always tried to balance it with being on Canadian stuff where I might have an opportunity to a bigger role. Yep. But that's why, again, the Star Trek job's been amazing, because if it was a Canadian show, I'd play this part. And if it was a giant international Paramount Plus show, I'd play this part. It's great.
So let's talk about theatre for a minute then. What has the stage given you that no other medium can?
Well, the biggest thing I've done I have for 20 years, I'm a real anniversary guy, clearly, because I know everything by the year. But for 20 years on and off, I've toured a solo version of Hamlet called Hamlet Solo, right? And so, and I've taken some very long breaks here and there while I was touring other shows and doing other things. I found producing my own theater projects extremely rewarding. I love performing for a live audience. The challenge with theater is it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of resource to get a show up. I love doing solo work. I love working collectively with other actors. It's still pretty hard to do. when you get used to television, like television is hard because the hours are long. Television is hard because you don't necessarily have enough time to rehearse. So you have to kind of walk in and just kind of like do it when it's only really been in your imagination or your trailer before that. Theater's like you rehearse it for weeks and you run it for weeks or you run it for months, and it takes up huge chunks of your time, and you have to really, you're on a schedule where you're at the theater every day at this time. And so, but Hamlet solo has probably been my biggest contribution to the theater because, I have this crazy one-person Hamlet that I've taken all over the place. I've done it literally all over the place, from Enfield to the Arctic Circle.
Yep.
Mike will know where Enfield is. Edinburgh Festival all across Canada, off Broadway, solo festival off Broadway, everywhere. So, but the theater, if you've grown up doing it, and if you've tried to, what I tried to do is to keep doing it, because the longer you stay away from the theater, the scarier it gets.
Yep.
And I'm often on set with amazing actors who've had very successful TV and film careers who'll be like, oh yeah, I'd love to do a play again, but I haven't done one in 12 years, or I haven't done one in 17 years, and I don't know if I could do one still. So I don't want to lose my ability to do it. So I try to keep doing it. And Toronto, again, I've spent quite a bit of my career back and forth between Canada and the US. But one thing about Toronto is it's a bit like London in that it's not wildly uncommon for an actor to have theater and television and film as part of their career. While I feel like in Hollywood, there's a very small theater ecology. It's not non-existent, but it's very small, and it's sort of like you're either at the Mark Taper Forum understudying Al Pacino, or you're in the 99-seat theater that only your friends come to. And Toronto doesn't have the scale of London or the history of London, but it does have a bit of that tradition. And of course, New York has that too. So it's not that it doesn't exist in the States, but there's a pretty strong mid-sized theater, and not just musicals, but like plays too that happen here. So it's been a good place to kind of work on that. And I've met so many interesting people doing that. And for all those shows. So last night I was on an episode. This is so funny from what you're saying. I was on an episode of Law and Order Toronto Criminal Intent last night.
We saw
and it was so, oh yeah. And so my son was watching it with me. And as the episode went on, I was like, yeah, I've known him for 20 years. Yeah, I did a show with her for the CW 20 years ago. Yeah, I worked with her husband. Oh yeah, that's my friend. You've actually met him before. Do you remember we met him in the mall? So I have, that's one of the great things about being in a community like this for so many chunks of my career, is that whether I walk on the set at Star Trek or I'm on a show like that, like I either know a ton of the actors. It's now to the point where like people on the crew are like, oh, hey, Raoul, how's it going? I'll be working with an American actor who'll be like, oh God, who's this guy? Because they don't know. They're in a totally different environment. Yeah. They don't know anybody. And then I can see them there. They'll have a scene, or I'll be doing an episode with them or something, and I'll come on set. And then all the crew start saying, hey, Raoul, how's it going? Haven't seen you for a while. Give me a hug, buddy. And then I just sort of see their shoulders drop. And they're like, okay, he must be one of the decent ones from this fucking place, because like they all seem to know him. So that must mean he's learned how to act, or he's ever been on TV before. Some people are in a bit of a panic when they're somewhere new.
I think you only need to worry when catering know your order without you having to order it. That's when,
Yeah. Then you're like, maybe I've been here too long. But, it's it's a great thing about our profession as performers, is that whether it's a musician or an actor, is that it does allow you sometimes to travel and experience work cultures in different places, and get to spend a little bit longer. So when you're on holiday, you can only be somewhere for a couple of days, and then you often have to leave.
Yep.
But when you get to work somewhere in a different city, different town, or you're touring, you get to experience cultures and people in a from sort of a different point of view. And that part I love about the work that we do. And even in Canada, like I didn't travel around Canada much as a kid, because if we were ever going anywhere, we were going to Ireland or India or Europe, or I didn't have a lot of family all across Canada, because my parents were both immigrants who came here.
Yeah.
So it's really only as an actor that I got to explore my own country, because I'd go shoot over here or tour over here, or so. that's one of the things I love about it. And theater is a place where, you might go camp out somewhere for 3 weeks or 4 weeks and you get to know this is what Saskatoon is like in January. Wow. Who knew it was this cold here? Yep.
I really like what you said about how there's more prevalence of it in Canada and in the UK, because here in the States, I think, we get so hung up on some of the larger cities where all of that is more accessible. And with New York, even like you said, in LA and Hollywood, there's not as big of a theater scene as we would see in New York. But I think there's a big difference having that kind of regional aspect or community aspect to theater, even though we see that in some places here. But you get into kind of outside of New York or LA or any of those other places, and we just don't have that exposure here. And I think that it's a big difference, because I think people don't always appreciate the nuance there is to being a stage actor and then going into TV or film work, which is kind of the bulk of what we see here in the States. So I have a lot of respect for that, because it's just a whole different beast of its own.
And still in Canada, I would say our regional theater system is not that different from America's. And America has some giant regional theaters, but you also have 10 times the population, So I think one difference between Canada and America is we do have more state and federal support for the arts in general. Mm-hmm. So we've kind of determined that it's sort of part of our cultural survival to have theaters that tell Canadian stories and other stories, but just even having those things, it's not entirely having to be funded by private donors, which I think is a real challenge in America, that so much of the performing arts really relies on the generosity of donors, and that, when people's 401ks or giant stock portfolios go down, sometimes those things can literally collapse or vanish. I mean, America has such a great tradition of philanthropy that I do think that's kind of things a lot of Canadians envy. But at the same time, when I, if I'm ever complaining to a theater artist in America, like, oh, I didn't get my grant to tour all of Canada, they're just like, wait, you can get a grant to tour all of Canada? Like, what are you complaining about? So,
right. Right.
So, there's different, and Canada is becoming more like the US in almost every way. So, that state funding is dropping and everyone's running out of money and nobody knows how to do it. So the theater community still, even though Canada is such a big country, it's still a fairly small group of crazy people that are still trying to do it. But, it's important in some of these communities. Like when I wrote a play called Life, Death, and the Blues, which was basically an autobiographical play with musicians and another singer about what blues music is and what it means to me, and how a half Indian, half Irish kid born in England basically got completely obsessed with performing and listening to and learning about this black music. And, there were times when I was performing it in these different cities across Canada where you thought, oh yeah, wow. They've never seen a play about cultural appropriation. They've never seen a play about cultural identity in this way. They've never thought about music in this way. No one's ever brought this conversation to them, and I think that's one of the things that is really powerful about theater is that, and now even more than ever, I actually go see theater probably more than I watch TV shows or movies, because I go into an environment where this goes on silence and I sit with other people and experience a thing for an hour, 90 minutes, 2 hours. And it's one of the few refuges where my attention is not pulled away by ads and just my phone basically buzzing at me to pay attention to it. So I do actually think it's interesting that maybe, people are going to gravitate back to the theater in a way where it becomes more and more of an experience that's not like the rest of our lives. While I think hundreds of years ago, it was like, oh no, this is like church. We all sit here quietly, watch a thing, and then we go home and we talk about it, or we forget we ever saw it. And now I'm like, oh no, I actually think theater is becoming like a pretty unique experience, particularly for young people who like basically, are in withdrawal when
the phone is stuck to their hand.
No, and I mean, it is to me, and I remember the before times, the pre-burn, the pre-cell phone burn.
Pre-cell phone burn.
I'm a lanthanite from the phones. I remember before phones, Nala Ake.
I do think there's something about what you're saying there about a shared human experience, like being able to share that time in that space in a creative environment and taking something from that. And I do hope that younger people begin gravitating to that more and more because
I think so. I feel like they realize, like my kids are 20 and 16. And, I do think like my 20-year-old, they're thinking a lot more about what technology has done to them as opposed to what the benefits of it have been. And they are yearning for more analog experiences.
Well, that's why things like cassettes are on the way back and vinyls made a comeback. It always goes round in a circle.
CDs. I can't believe it. I haven't printed a CD for my music in about 5 years, and I have almost none left because I was basically giving them away at one point. And now all these musicians are like, you better get your back catalog repeated, man, because people are buying CDs. I'm like, what are you talking about? People were
if we go back to 8 tracks, we're in trouble.
Yeah, we're in big trouble. Here's a great song for you. Remember when cars had 8 tracks? You guys are probably not old enough, but when cars had 8 tracks, man. Oh my God.
So
take this job and shove it. I ain't working here no more. Those were like 8 tracks. K-Tel's greatest country hits now on 8-track. Cody, I am old.
True.
I have no idea how old you are. I don't need to know. But boy, did that.
Sir, I'm older than you. True story.
I don't believe.
True story. I am. I'm 56. Born in 70.
Take this job and K-Tel's greatest 8-track country music hits. Available now. Dial 1-800. Yeah. Sorry, digressing. We'll never get through this thing at this rate.
No, we can talk about 8 tracks for days.
Yes. I mean, to be fair though, somehow we always manage to age ourselves in these episodes, and well, we've done it again. So you said earlier that theatre is full of crazy people. So let's just talk about how you can play 17 characters in a solo play, because I think that's pretty much the definition.
Yes.
How do you actually pull it off?
My director, Robert Ross Parker, and I, who still, when he is available, comes on tour with me. So it's kind of a 20-year work in progress. When we developed the show, we thought of it less like a play where someone's standing over here, and then the person they're talking to is standing over here. So I have to walk and stand here, and then walk and stand here. Like, we did that for a few minutes, and we were like, okay, this is going to be terrible and actually confusing. Now, there's a few sections that are like that, but if we do that, it's absolutely on purpose. We started to actually think of it more like a film, which is that it actually just cuts from character to character. And sometimes he'd even say, like, oh yeah, so at this point, it's kind of like Claudius in close-up. So it's Claudius's head, but it's cutting back to Hamlet moving in his body. And then it's we just see Claudius's sort of, almost in a tight shot. We go to a cowboy and it's Hamlet who's moving around trying to figure out what to do. But when Claudius is talking like this, we know it's Claudius. And in the weird way that Shakespeare works, I mean, Shakespeare spends the first 20 minutes of his plays basically introducing all the characters and naming them like crazy. King Claudius, tell us why you're like this. My son Hamlet, that's what the plays are full of. And on purpose, because when the play starts, it wasn't like, the people standing in standing room only at Shakespeare's Globe in 1604. They hadn't read the play before. They didn't have PhDs in Shakespeare. They were just coming to watch a story that this Shakespeare guy was putting on, and they didn't know who anybody was. And in fact, the guy wearing the king costume kind of wore the same thing last week in the other show. Like, it wasn't, they weren't these grand visual spectacles that theater is now even, right? So it's funny that in our version of Hamlet, the solo version, in some ways the changes between the characters are quite small, but once you get used to the form, which usually is quite terrifying for people in the first few minutes, so even though it's called Hamlet solo, people still are like, oh my God, this guy's going to do the whole thing on his own. What have I signed up for? But even with that, people are often remark on that it's actually one of the clearest versions they've ever seen, which should be a contradiction. But I think it's because the viewer starts to really engage with the words and really engage with the story. And it's almost like when you read a novel and you have to do all that imaginative work, you're watching one person do it and you're sort of having to fill in all the rest of it. And I'm just kind of the conduit for Shakespeare's play, and it kind of channels through me. And you guys do a lot of work watching it. And yeah, so when I first did the play, for me, it was sort of, there was an element of like, watch a man do something impossible. And actually, my friend Eddie Izzard is touring the world with her version of it. Her version of a solo, Izzard Hamlet, it's called.
Yep.
Or Izzard Does Hamlet. Susie's going all over the world doing it. And I think she says she does 23 characters. I cut it off around 17. So,
yes, but
funny
of
story
course she would turn around and say that, because she's always going to try and one-up everybody.
Yeah, everybody. But we were shooting Dan Brown's The Lost Symbol in Toronto together a couple years ago. And I was in the back of a minivan with a gun to her head as the evil guy. And, sometimes scenes take like 10 hours to shoot. So we were literally in this van without the camera on us for hours and hours. And we just started talking. And I mean, Eddie Izzard is really one of the most unique, interesting people I have ever met, like human beings. Complete, fascinating life form who performs stand-up in 3 different languages. And I said, oh, well, when did you learn German? And she said, I can't really speak German. I was like, okay, hold on. You can't speak German, but you do your routine in German. And she's like, yes, well, I pretty much learned it phonetically. And I was like,
yeah, she's nuts.
Right?
So for this person to be like, I'm going to do a solo Hamlet, I was like, now I've met somebody. I've met somebody where I'm like, yes, not only will you do it, you will probably tour the world doing it. And of course, Susie's taking it to every theater I ever tried to get mine into and could never get it into. So I probably have to sort of semi-retire mine until Susie's done the entire world at every theater, and then I'll
collaborate.
Oh my God! Well, she was here doing it a month ago in Toronto. But I'd already seen it in New York. I didn't have a chance, but I was hoping to like do her question and answer to be like, hey, if there's anyone in this room who knows how hard what she's doing is. But it's interesting because in some ways our shows are very similar. It's one person who walks out on stage. She doesn't have a ton of props, doesn't have a ton of costume changes. She has a little bit more cueing, a little bit more of a set. But but her influence in her solo work, even in the theater, is kind of like Richard Pryor. She has almost like a stand-up's inspiration for it. And I don't know whose mine is, but it's not Richard Pryor. Like we're kind of coming at it from quite different ways. So it's pretty cool because they are in some ways the same, but because it relies so much on the individual, it's completely different. So that was pretty cool to see her version, because I told her, I was like, hey, you're not going to know this, but, for the last 15 years, I've toured a solo Hamlet. And she was like, oh, cool, you've done it too. So, so we sort of chatted about it. But no, she's amazing. So hopefully people will have the chance to see either version. And then
yes, because she's in London next month for it.
Yeah, which she's already been at the Riverside Studios. She did a run. And I get it, because what happens is, once you start performing your solo Hamlet, it becomes an intoxicating experience as an actor. You almost can't stop doing it because you get such a high off it. It's still the hardest thing I've ever done. It still is the hardest thing I will ever do. And, Susie's quite a few years older than me and does 2 show days and doesn't really blink. And I've thought like, God, will I be able to still do this 5 years from now, let alone 10? She set the bar pretty high for me not hanging up my slippers.
I love that. Do you think there's a correlation between like taking on a role like that has so many different performances that rely on the individual, but also in blues music, there's that you hand off the improv or the line to another performer in the group, or and that kind of makes it circle. There is kind of that sharing of characters or voices in music as there is in doing maybe a one-person show. Is that part
Yeah,
of the appeal?
yeah, I mean, I'd say the funny thing with Hamlet solo is my director will come off stage and be like, Polonius had a good night tonight, didn't he? And I'd be like, yeah. And he said, Polonius kind of threw Ophelia when he did that bit. And it's true because my job is to when I do Hamlet solo, I've got 17 people standing in the wings going, have you proven Ophelia's point tonight? Did you make a strong case for Ophelia? So for me, it's I literally have had the experience where something new comes out of one of the characters and it changes the next character's reaction because the first character said it a different way that night. But it's me. I mean, that happens in the theater every night. Ideally, it's alive that way. But it's pretty funny because sometimes I surprise me when I'm doing me, and me has to adjust for me. But again, I'm putting most of that down, not so much to blues, but pretty much to the fact that I'm a Gemini. This must be. It must have
That has
something
to
to
be
do.
it.
Has to have something.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
So let's talk about blues then. So obviously, Raoul and the Big Time.
Yes.
Obviously, Maple Blues Award winners. What's that journey meant to you? Because that's been one hell of a journey from start to finish.
Where do I start, Mike? Since my baby left me, I found a new place to go. Down at the end of Lonely Street at Heartbreak Hotel. Yeah, listen, when I got given that first harmonica as a kid, I started looking for music that had harmonica in it, and a cool guy in a record store in Bonn, Germany said, here's 3 albums, go listen to those.
What were they?
One was Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee on the road again.
Yep.
One was Sonny Boy Williamson, More Real Folk Blues. And at the same time, I had a Louis Armstrong record, which had no harmonica on it. But that kind of got me into Louis Armstrong and also early jazz music. And my first performances in front of people playing music was actually as probably an 11-year-old impersonating Louis Armstrong. Before I sang in my own voice, I sang as an 11-year-old singing Louis Armstrong. I think I did Alexander's Ragtime Band when I was about 11. Come on in here, that kind of thing. So I can't do it anymore because I was told by a club owner that it was
Copyright infringement?
it was vocal blackface,
Oh.
which I thought was a little harsh. But I was sort of like, if that's how it's going to be perceived by people, then that's probably not what I'm going for. But he was he's absolutely one of my biggest influences. So at the same time, I was only doing it in the context of a song that was about him being my biggest influence, as opposed to audience. I want you to believe that I am Louis Armstrong. That was not what I was going. He may have been a legendary black performer, but this beige man will be him instead. No, that was not what I was doing.
No.
That's for another day. But no, blues music. One of the things with my band is that my drummer, but particularly my guitar player, are the same people I've worked with for 28 years.
Wow.
So it really, even though it's called Raoul and the Big Time is pretty much the band. Like, I have played with the same people for so long, we have kind of a synergy, and we can sort of sense the other one in a way that you only get from playing or performing with people for a long time. And my band has gotten bigger over the years. It started as 4 people. Then it was like 5, then it went back to 4, then it was 7 because I added 3 horns, and then I added piano. So I have piano, upright bass, drums, guitar, vocal harmonica guitar, alto saxophone, tenor saxophone, and trumpet. So now I kind of have the blues band of my dreams, where I can do this big range of blues music that covers all these different kinds of songs and sounds. I've put out 5 albums with the Big Time, so I have a lot of original music too. So there's kind of original music plus some classic covers that maybe people don't, that when I started, you'd hear the odd band do, but now almost 30 years later, they're music that, there's songs from 1950 that nobody performs anymore. As blues music as a genre has kind of moved more into like rock and fusion and rhythm and blues and soul, like we've kind of stayed in our own weird little compartment of our own sound. So in a funny way, what we do has become sort of more and more unique because less and less people do what we do. And of course, the more we do it, the more we become like ourselves. Because in blues, you start with imitation, and then ultimately you arrive at self-expression. The highest compliment any blues player will ever hear is that right when they start, somebody knows it's them.
Yep.
As opposed to like, watch me play the collected works of B.B. King in my own guitar solo. No, that's awesome that you can do that. And we all need that as a foundation. But ultimately, my favorite blues players, the contemporary ones, the classic ones, are where I hear 3 notes of them singing or playing, and I'm like, ooh, I know who that is. Because their personality is entirely expressed in their sound. So that's, to me, kind of the goal, and still is the ongoing goal. And I'm still frustrated by my own abilities constantly. And, it's all a work in progress, really. But it's a very difficult time like, when I started out, I used to make a living as a musician and an actor kind of in parallel. Mm-hmm. There were enough opportunities to play live. There were enough nightclubs. There were enough places. The cost of living was lower, so the portion of money I'd make as a musician went further. Now we like to say in music in North America that it's the 50th anniversary of the $100 gig. Yep. Mm-hmm. So we're still making $100 to $200 a night, when really, if we were really musicians, should, like I had a really great weekend from my band where we played an awards show, and we had our anniversary show, and we did the 2 shows on a Saturday and a Sunday, and I gave my band like a nice big amount of money at the end of that weekend. And I was like, wow, if that's what I could pay my band every 2 performances, people could make a living as a musician.
Yep.
But instead I have, experienced musician friends who just want to play, and we're playing at clubs where we're getting paid what we got paid 20 years ago, which is sort of the story of our entire society, isn't it, in many ways? And
it's not like you're earning anything from streaming, because you're getting a 0.00001 cents per stream, and yeah.
And and that's what's funny about CDs coming back, because once CDs were basically off the table as a way to make back money, I've barely recorded any new music since, because the cost of making a new record, even as an independent artist, might be, say, $10,000.
Yeah.
But if I get paid by Spotify, hi to all our Spotify listeners. If I get paid by Spotify $120 a year for 8 albums of music that are on the streamer, I mean, it's kind of like when you get a credit card statement, and it's like, if you pay off this minimum balance, you should be able to pay this off entirely in 185 years.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's kind of the same, like it's almost that in reverse, where because of streaming, which I love in one way, it's made my music instantly accessible to people literally all over the world. I can look at the reports and go, wow, somebody in Hungary listened to my song. Someone in Tibet listened to my song. This is incredible.
And that crazy person in England who has Nothing Gonna Take Me Down on repeat is here. Because I actually stumbled upon you probably in lockdown.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I stumbled upon Hollywood Boulevard.
I love it. Mike, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Pre-preparation for this interview, you've heard my music. That's unusual.
And I'm a sound engineer by training.
And you watched my episode of Saving Hope. I mean, you've got a lifetime pass, Mike. You've got a lifetime pass to the Raoul access here. There's no special code required. Yes. No, but it's great, man. And look, that is amazing, right? Like that part of it is great. But so what happened to my music career? I've always worried that what happens when the technology advances and the digital wave crashes over my other career, which is kind of where we are now. Television, film, content, YouTube becoming the biggest broadcasting sort of force in the world.
Mad.
How is everyone going to be compensated for their efforts? And that part of it, again, like something like this is completely amazing. I'm talking to you guys. We're in 3 different countries all at the same time, talking about me. So, I mean, nothing could be better than that. I mean, first of all, that's just magic. But no, but also like, technology is allowing us to do this, which is completely incredible. It'll be for an audience that's interested in it. It hasn't had to go through all the cultural gatekeepers and financial gatekeepers to allow us to do this. We just get to do it if we want. That part's amazing. But, finding a way to make sure that people are compensated is really the next horizon. Otherwise, people won't be able to make art to give you. And maybe with AI, maybe that's kind of the plan, is that you actually won't need any of us who've spent our life professionally making it. You'll be able to press a button and the algorithms will generate it based on all the stuff we've made before. But we can all see that would have a short runway. If everything is derivative of itself, when frankly, everything is already a bit derivative of itself, like that's just storytelling. But if it all just becomes a variation on previous content, like I'm worried that's not going to be that interesting. Plus the fact that not just me, but what about the younger generation of artists, the people I work with who are 20 years old? I want them to have an opportunity to be storytellers for the rest of their lives, not to be people who have to have 7 different jobs and then occasionally get to do this on the side. Like one reason I'm good at what I do is I've literally spent, that's why it's pretty funny when I look back over my career. Like I've pretty much woken up every day from when I finished school wanting and kind of doing the same thing.
Yeah.
How do I perform? Where do I perform? When's my next performance? Like that's been my entire life. And some of that really is a generational advantage because I got that start at a time when it was a little more, the wage I made doing these things was closer to what it cost to live. I look at my kids now and go like, of course they'd all want to be on the stock market or be, crypto investors or something insane because they're looking at the economics and going, well, how am I going to do what you did? Yeah. Like I couldn't buy a house 20 years. Like you bought a house 20 years ago. I couldn't buy a house now.
$750,000 to spend on a house.
Mm-hmm. No. Yeah. And why would you? And if you did, maybe you should spend it on something else.
Well, yeah, exactly.
A house is cool. I live in one, but really, if you had that much money, are you sure you wouldn't want to do something else with it? Buy a jet ski? No, I don't tell my kids to buy that.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely tougher for the younger people now. Even me at 35, even I look at kids now and go, Jesus. But then also at the same time, I look at kids nowadays and go, God, you need a good slap because at your age, I was doing a paper round, 7 days a week, and you just want to sit around and watch YouTube all day. So I think some of it's also a bit of a culture shift.
Be careful about slagging people watching YouTube because that's what they're watching on right now.
Exactly, yes.
So watch our podcast-related material on YouTube, but all that other junk, get off it.
Don't
Absolutely.
Don't do that.
And if the title card for the video is AI generated, just have a think about what you're about to watch. What is the chance that there's any truthful content in it? Mm-hmm. I saw someone commented on one of my posts and said, "Is it true that season 2 of Starfleet Academy has been canceled?" And I was like, I know exactly that you got that information from YouTube. And I can't guarantee it because season 2 is not on. But I would be like, the person was very concerned. It was in all caps. And I just remember thinking like, this is where YouTube information can get you, if this is now look, if there's a void, that's where people need to go. If people are fans, that's where they're going to go. But like all YouTube information must be taken with a grain of salt.
Oh, well, all information on the internet needs to be taken with a grain of salt, to be fair.
Yeah.
All of it.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's talk about Star Trek Starfleet Academy. Were you a Star Trek fan before you got the role?
I have to be careful because I realized when I was on the blue carpet, I said something and then I was like quoted as a lifelong Trekkie. And I was like, wait a second.
Well, you can set the record straight. There you go.
Well, yeah, it's just that it has to, because I now understand what a lifelong Trekkie is. And I am not one of you. And I only mean that, just in that, like, I understand now what that means.
Yep.
Now, have I seen Star Trek for my whole life? Yes. Was the first thing I ever saw original series at my age? Yes, absolutely. Morning cartoons, lunchtime, Star Trek. That was the Saturday or Sunday. I saw tons of original series episodes growing up. It was on repeat. When I was in high school, towards the end of high school, that was when Next Generation came out. That was very exciting. I think, like a lot of people, there was like, what's this? How could you do Star Trek again? How could this possibly happen? But it didn't take long before people were like, yeah, hey, they're walking around in leotards, but this is cool. This is cool. Like, this is different, but sure, why not? And of course, I was a fan of Patrick Stewart. He'd been in the original first Hamlet I'd ever seen, which was a BBC Hamlet with Derek Jacobi, and he played Claudius, even though they were probably only about 5 years different in age. But because he had his early baldness, he's looked the same age for like 40 years, which is incredible. Plus side to getting bald, guys, like Robert Picardo. I'm like, Bob, this is working, man. You're eternal. So yeah, I was really an original series person, and then I had seen some of Next Generation, but then I went off to learn to be an actor, and I barely watched any TV. So I was not Voyager, Deep Space Nine, Enterprise, unaware. Like knew of them, but was not seen almost any of them. One of my first jobs in television was Gene Roddenberry's Earth Final Conflict, where I played student leader. I got a rifle butt in the stomach as student leader. That was probably 20 minute walk from where I live now. So I've been in 8 seconds of Earth Final Conflict. But in terms of Trek, then when the reboot in New Trek happened, I'd seen the movies. I have a friend who I just adore, who's one of my mentors and just an absolute hero of a Canadian actor, the great Bruce Greenwood, who plays Commander Pike in the movie, in the reboot movies. And so I was actually in the back of a London black cab with Bruce when he was talking to J.J. Abrams after he'd accepted the role, which was so cool. And I remember that moment going like, wow, that's Bruce, man. Like, he's just been such an amazing actor, and he's had such an incredible career. And for a Canadian actor who went to Hollywood, like, he's really had one of the, and particularly of his generation, like, he's had one of the great ones. And as a dramatic actor, like, Canadian actors have done very well in Hollywood. We have all these incredible comedians who've gone for a generation or two. But, you know, he was a dramatic actor, and he'd done so well. And I was like, wow. There's Bruce, you know, in a J.J. Abrams movie written by some guy, Alex Kurtzman. Wow, that's going to be how great to be Bruce. That'll never be me.
And then here you are.
And here I am, which is amazing. Yeah, you know, and so I had seen all those movies.
Yep.
Of course, and that was cool too. You know, reboot. Can you really replace those actors? Can you really do it again? But they were fun and had a lot of energy, and I liked all those new actors who were in it. And then, what was it called? CBS All Access? Is that what it was first called? Yeah. So I was excited about Picard, but like a lot of people, I didn't like get a streaming service to watch it. You know, I was like, this will be cool, but I'm not going to be one of the people who pays for this to
Just
watch
one
that.
show. Yep.
Yeah. And then, you know, Discovery was also shot in Toronto.
Yep.
So I had an audition for a great role on Discovery, which I absolutely would have loved to get, which I didn't get.
Which was?
And I can't say.
Oh,
I don't
go on.
And then I progressively got more auditions for it, but every part after that got smaller and smaller and smaller.
Oh.
And also, we were always sent dummy scripts, so they were never the character. They were never really the lines. And at some point, you just started to go like, oh, God. And then in the pandemic, I got cast in Clarice, which was the Silence of the Lambs spinoff created by Alex Kurtzman and Jenny Lumet. And I got this great part as the sort of baddie on it, Joe Hudlin. And I did 7 episodes of that. And once I got that, I said to my agents, submit me for no more Discovery or Star Trek unless it's a big part, because I've been hired to play a big part by some of the same team.
Yep.
And now they know who I am. And if they like me, maybe I'll get a shot at something else. And I'm sure my agents went, yeah, sure, great.
Whatever.
Literally, whatever, egomaniac. Couple years go by. More friends have been on Discovery. Some friends have been on Strange New Worlds, you know, which is so great. Like my friend Bruce Horak, who plays Hemner.
We love Bruce.
Yeah, Bruce is an amazing guy. I've known Bruce, like Bruce and I did improv during all that, like 2020, early 2000s improv with him. He's now, on tour with his Goblin Oedipus, his Goblin Macbeth, which he does with my dear friend Rebecca Northern, who's one of those improv. I was telling you, I know these people are doing really interesting things with improv. Of course, it's Bruce and Rebecca, small world. So I was so thrilled for Bruce when he got that part, because Bruce is 1000% a true Trekkie.
Yep.
So for him to get that part, and for an actor who's pretty much blind, where the opportunities are not there for an actor like him on television that there should be.
Yep.
And when I heard the experience he had and the relationship he had and what they did and how they worked together, I was like, and I would say on Clarice, I was extremely impressed by the team of people involved with it, the vibes, the people. Demaine Davis, who was the showrunner on Clarice, who now runs Brilliant Minds for NBC.
Yep.
She's an amazing person. And the cast was amazing. People were really cool. I was like, this Kurtzman guy, really, this is the right vibe. I've been on a lot of shows, and most shows, the experience is pretty positive. But some shows that are big, there's a lot of weird stuff going on. There's so much egos. There's so much pressure. It's hard for people to remain human in a good way. But I'd heard, and remember, Discovery was shot, and Some of Strange New Worlds. That was some of that was shot during the height of the pandemic, which I think is hard for people to appreciate. But imagine how hard it was to do whatever job you did if you even left the house.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now imagine that you're doing a job maskless, this close to people, screaming and yelling, and nobody knows if there's going to be a vaccine. Nobody knows if they're going to get COVID. If you get COVID and you're deemed the person who got it, they might have to shut down production for weeks, which costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was an extremely stressful time when all that television was being made. Actually, when I did Clarice, little sidebar, I made more money getting COVID tested than I did doing plays in Toronto. I was like, COVID is terrible. We need this to end. If you guys need to test me 5 times in a week, that takes 4 minutes for a nasal swab, I mean, I could really pay my mortgage doing this. This is incredible. But it was crazy what they did. And when I heard people say still that cast and crew were still trying to find a way to not lose it on each other and not freak out and still execute at the level they did. That was all very impressive. So when I got the call that I was to audition for this new Star Trek series, I was like, okay, well, it hasn't started yet. So it felt more like the big part, like in Discovery. But I was like, that big part I auditioned for didn't go to a Canadian actor. It went to a great American actor. So I was like, sometimes as a Canadian in Canada, when you're working in Canada, you can feel like it's you're being seen, but you're not really being considered.
Yeah.
Kind of being
it's almost like ticking a box.
Yeah. So I was like, I don't really want to be box ticked on this, but it's for Alex, who knows who I am, who gave me a great job before. So I read for it. I did my best and auditioned for it. Sent in my tape, probably with this background and this light that's behind me, behind the lens right now. And I still had Alex's email. And so I just sent a little email. Hey, Alex, it's Raoul. I just read for this really cool part in your new series. Be great to work together again. It was really fun to have the opportunity. Yours. Send. I've never been particularly shy about that, but also, you have to be pretty judicious when you bug these fancy people who, are really busy. And I didn't hear anything back, which is not unusual because often during the audition process, people don't want to be like, yeah, you're my favorite. I can't wait to be on the show, because they know that actors do crazy things like ask for 10 times as much money or whatever. They have to be cool. Or they know you're not going to get it and they don't want to be like, you're not going to get it. So I didn't hear anything for quite a while. Like a couple of weeks went by and I was like, oh, well, I did my best. On to the, like I said, we have to just let these things go as actors and move on to the next one. Well, Star Trek wouldn't be that good to be on anyways, or whatever. You tell yourself all these weird stories and you just go. wouldn't they be crazy not to hire me? And then like my agent called me and said, in 2 days, you've got a Zoom callback with Holly Hunter. And I was like, oh, I guess Alex did read my email. Oh, there's no way Holly Hunter's on Zoom with 50 different candidates. Like if Holly's on the Zoom, I have to be on sort of some kind of short list. So you get excited and you get a little bit nervous. So I set up my trusty ironing board that is currently holding my laptop in my kitchen. I'm in my bedroom, but I set up my kitchen. And I've mentioned this before in a couple interviews, but when the Zoom opened, as it does, you know, when your host lets you in, as Mike did today, I saw like 40 windows.
Oh.
They were like, tick, 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 tick. And then as soon as I came on, they all started to disappear. And I was like, holy
what did
shit.
I do?
I was like, okay, not only is this a callback with Alex and Holly on Zoom, like there's a ton of people watching this. You know, for an actor, you know, again, there's no like, we're all going to watch the 17th choices audition.
Yeah.
People don't have time for that. They want, when it's down to a handful, then people decide to join. So we had quite a workout. It was great, but it was weird because, you know, it was Zoom. So at parts I was cutting out and Holly didn't hear me say this line and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, I did the best I could. And my agent had said to me, we'll hear either way in a day or two. So, you know, and I had this crazy thing where the Trades, this other show I'm on, was basically like, hey, what's going on? Why aren't you confirming your contract with us? Like, are we going to have to like cut you out of the show? So I was in this very weird position where I was like, okay, well, I'll know in a few days and hopefully I'll be able to do both shows, but I just need a few days. And then actually I didn't hear anything again for like a week and a bit. And then I heard, oh, they're maybe considering some other actors. Like you're still being considered. So at that point you just kind of go, oh crap. All right. Yeah. I can't think about this anymore. And so I kind of had to do something which I would normally never do with Star Trek or any big show, was I basically had to give them a bit of a deadline because I was going to lose my other series.
Yeah.
And then
You have to look after yourself first.
Yeah. And instead of having potentially 2 shows, I might be left having 0 shows, which, you know, I couldn't do. And then at the very last minute, basically, I think the cutoff was like end of day Friday. And I didn't hear anything. And I was like, all right, buddy, let it go. You're in this amazing position where you actually have another job, not as big a job, but a job you love, on a show you love, on a character, with a character you love playing with amazing people. Hey, man, it's cool. Like, if you had just one of these things, you'd be happy. Be happy! And so I was happy, but a bit sad because, you know, I was just like, of course, like any actor who would land a role on Star Trek, you can't help but go, what will this mean? Will I be talking to Mike and Jody 18 months from now about myself? Will I be doing
crosses
Zooms?
the mind.
Oh, yeah.
Will I be doing Zooms from my bedroom? Is that what my life will hold? But it's true. Like, you just have no idea what it will mean. And in a way, because it's Star Trek, it's not like other jobs. No. It's not. So I let it go, and my wife looked at me, as she's an actor too, so my wife kind of looked at me and was like, and I was like, yeah, let it go. And then I get a text from my agent saying, you got the part. They're going to officially offer it to you on Monday. This is like 2.5 hours after the deadline. You got the part. They're going to offer it to you on Monday. Stand by. And I was like, holy crap. And then, you know, a little bit of contract and schedule stuff goes on. But basically, I mean, I wasn't going to say no. If they'd basically said, don't forward this to the producers. But at that time, had they said, you know, we'd like you to do it for free. We'd like you to pay us to be on it. I probably would have said, well, I don't know, but sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a completely crazy experience. And then, you know, we had a break between season 1 and season 2, which was about 6 months. So there was a break, but in another way, I mean, it was sort of from August 2024 to February 2026, because we were renewed early on in season 1 shooting. I didn't know if I'd be in season 2. I didn't know in what capacity I'd be in season 2. But just knowing that the show was going on, and then once I found out that I was going to be on season 2, it was like a very unusual experience for an actor to kind of be at ease, knowing that you didn't.
I've got work in the future.
Yeah, and not only do I have work, but it's the work that I get to do with Holly Hunter and Paul Giamatti and these other great young actors who've all showed up to be a part of this thing. So that's been kind of an amazing peace of mind that I haven't had since I did 318 episodes of Train 48. That kind of security, where you could look over the period of almost 2 years and go like,
yeah, you can breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief that,
Yes.
So what was your first reaction to Kelrec then as a character? You've got your first script, you're reading through. What's your first reaction?
Well, what was great is that the scenes I'd been provided were not dummy scenes.
Oh, nice.
The scenes I had auditioned for were scenes that ended up being in episodes 3, 5, and 6. So what was great is that
you sat in a room full of tea? No?
it was well, you can see, right? Like,
Right.
But so that was helpful because my starting point was at least accurate in that I knew what I had done in the audition was some component of what they wanted. And I find with the dummy scenes, it's hard to know sometimes because the situations can be quite arbitrary that they give actors in dummy scenes. Not so much for Star Trek, but for anything. Any big franchise thing where they can't send out an actual scene from it because it'll be on the internet the next day. Sometimes you're just like, what is this? Like, it makes no sense. So then, but it was great because I was then, when I read the scripts, I'm like, oh, this is actually like a scene I'm going to do with Holly, like we did in the Zoom, like I prepared. So, yeah, Kelrec in season 1, it was, I thought, okay, this is a part I think I can do a good job in that it requires a combination of dramatic and comedic instincts. And I also thought it was a valuable point of view to kind of represent in the show, of someone who was a bit more of a traditionalist, someone who didn't kind of like buy that this whole thing was going to be great, someone who had a chip on his shoulder about having to, I've seen some commentary about him like not knowing how to talk to a woman or something like that, but I don't really think it was that. I don't think he had a problem with Nala at all because she was a woman, because he's a Starfleet officer. It's that he had a problem with Nala because she's Nala.
Yeah.
not that she's a woman.
But walking around in bare feet and
and again, I say that only not as a criticism of anyone who had that point of view, because of course I firmly believe that fans can look at it any way they want and have any view on it. I that's for them to have. I just do the thing and you guys can think about it whatever you want. But I was interested, and I actually thought a bit of I thought of Kelrec a little bit as a combination of, okay, I'm going to get a little nerdy here. I did a Shakespeare in the School event with an actor I've known for a long time, who I've admired, who's definitely appeared in lots of shows and has dabbled into the genre world. And he's a great Canadian actor named Colm Feore. You would have seen him and he was talking about working on the Thor movies in the scene with Anthony Hopkins, directed by Kenneth Branagh, and him. And he told me the story about how they spoke to each other in almost a Shakespearean plot and character shorthand to describe the moment that they were shooting. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was kind of like, yeah, so he's a bit like King Lear in this point, and this is a bit like this other bit, and they kind of knew the plays enough and knew what it was enough that they were able to kind of go like, okay, I know it. Like they had a reference point outside of the script. So when Colm mentioned that in this talk we were doing for high school kids, I was like, oh, that's cool. And there was something about Kelrec where when I looked at sort of, like I didn't get the complete season of scripts. We got a batch of scripts at a time. But I sort of looked at Kelrec as, particularly in what I had to do in season 1, as like part Malvolio from Twelfth Night. Kind of this like officious, proud, fussy, kind of a bit over the top
Yep.
guy who really fancies himself. And then, but then also combined with like one of these sort of tough warriors from the history plays,
Yeah.
you know, like, you know, in those great War of the Roses Shakespeare plays, Henry IV, Richard III, Richard II, where, you know, there's these dukes and lords who are basically warrior guys. And I was like, he's some combination of those two. Like, he's not entirely a comedic part, and he's not entirely a warrior part. He's somewhere
In between.
He kind of contains elements of both. And I also thought a lot about how Star Trek has been the home for actors who've done a lot of Shakespeare. And of course, one of my like, I went to Shakespeare's Globe on a Christopher Plummer scholarship. I knew Christopher Plummer kind of in the last 20 years of his life. And so, you know, Chris being on Undiscovered Country, Shatner, of course, they both got their start together as Shakespearean actors in Montreal and then at the Stratford Festival in the 1950s together.
Yep.
And I thought, like, looking at Star Trek as an actor through a Shakespearean lens, and of course, Patrick Stewart, hands down, incredible. And of course, many, many, many other actors who have done Shakespeare who you know, but those were kind of lightning rod people for me. And so I thought looking at this a bit through a Shakespearean lens would help me figure out who this guy was. And so that was sort of a starting point for me to think, well, how can he be a character that contains this and that? And to me, I really love the contrasts. Kelrec, when he's in front of the cadets, is sort of revealed as one kind of person.
Yeah.
And Kelrec, when he's with Nala, reveals a different side of himself. And I thought that was really interesting. But I also loved that we had episode 6, that when the crap hits the fan, you see him and Nala partner together and become people on the same side. That even if there were these philosophical disputes about how the school should be run, how people should be trained, how we're both supposed to behave, that when the cadets are put in jeopardy, we are absolutely captain and commander.
Yep.
And I really appreciated that I had that to show of him. And I thought it was an interesting arc for the viewer because people have their relationship to who he was also changed. And by the time we got to episode 9, you know, I'm not in the end part of the season as much, but when in episode 9 you really see Nala and Kelrec kind of working together, because again, Newsprock is like going to cut off the entire world, the Federation of Planets. You know, you got to see like, oh yeah, when it comes to this, they're on the same team, and despite their differences, they're going to try to find a way to work together. And I think there's a grudging respect that he gives Nala, and I think she comes to understand him a bit more. He's pretty good at reading people, that character, and she has a lot of life experience. So she kind of calls him on what she thinks he is, and I think in some ways she is right in the beginning. And so for me, I loved that arc through season 1 of that relationship between them. And it made it a fun character to play, you know, that he has this dimension. And it's interesting because I feel like now a lot of people are like, who is this guy? Like, what is this guy?
It's funny you say that because
we spoke about
as
this,
a viewer and as a viewer and a fan, I find Kelrec very endearing and the duality of him intriguing. And
Right.
I'm absolutely not going to let you go today without asking you, because I feel like this was a watershed moment for Kelrec. But it's the dinner scene with Kelrec, and then you're there playing with Holly Hunter, Bob Picardo, and Tig Notaro. I mean, that scene, that should be a class that is studied just on that scene alone because it's so brilliantly played with not only humor and bravado, but also there's a lot of nuance happening between the four of you in that scene.
Yep.
And it's a special moment. And I think it's a moment for both Ake and for Kelrec. But oh my goodness, that scene is epic.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't. I mean, like I play it over and over in my head because it's funny, and it's moving the story along, and Kelrec is having to show a side of himself that, like, look, I don't
really
want to do this.
yeah.
Yes,
he
I don't want to do
really
this.
doesn't want to do this.
And you've got Picardo, who's just doing what he does as the Doctor so well, playing it just to the fullest, and and then
the enthusiast that the Doctor is for like weird stuff.
Oh,
like
yes.
the Cometa, my favorite. The Cometa ritual, my favorite. And you're like, oh my God, Picardo's so good. Oh my God, I love Picardo on every level. Robert Picardo, I love him as a man. I love him as an actor. He's just become a great friend, and I mean, he's incredible. Yeah, it was interesting because I remember after we shot that day, I remember, Robert and I hadn't had much to do together before that. Mm-hmm. And I remember him coming up to me and going like, because when you shoot the whole day and you shoot a scene like that, like these lines were said so many different ways and so many different combinations to give the editors and the director options of, does Kelrec leave angry? Does Kelrec leave frustrated? Does Kelrec get hurt? Does Kelrec get sad? We tried all these different variations. And I remember we got to the end and Bob came up to me and he was like, you did really well today. And that was very meaningful to me because, that's just warms you when you have an actor like that who's been around and seen it all. And he was basically saying, like, that was kind of him saying to me, like, you're going to be fine in this whole thing. Yeah. With this Star Trek. Like, this will help you, this will help people understand this character. And therefore it will help you fit into the great universe that is this show. And so it was kind of a gift in season 1 to have that kind of story. And ultimately, I think it was interesting because some people were like, man, they were so mean to Kelrec, man. Like, Jesus, he's just trying to figure out how to do this damn dinner and they're making fun of him. But, it was also this lesson for him where, he had to figure out for this particular meeting that he was going to, if he took himself that seriously, his meeting with this woman who he's very interested to meet for whatever reason, we're not exactly sure.
I mean, look, he wants to heat up the ocean for her. I mean, if that's not
isn't that what every woman wants?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Maybe in the 32nd century.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Exactly. And I do think, there is an element of Kelrec, when you go into his quarters, it's quite austere.
Yes.
And, you kind of think like he's someone who's pretty alone.
But he's also, I think, very methodical. Everything has a place, everything's in its place, and it has to stay in its place. And if it's not, it's I can just imagine it as, a toolbox and one spanner's missing, and that's it. The world is over now until that spanner is found and put back in its place. Yeah. And there's that methodism to him that I think that with that scene at dinner is just, it's magic.
Well, he grew up, also like Nala's a pre-burn person.
And he is a child of the burn, isn't he?
He's a child of the burn, and I think the survival rate of War College cadets, I think, was not what it used to be in the old days. And I think the fact that even in the season, I mean, God, Tarima has this incident where she basically
comatoses herself.
Yeah, poor old Bobby bravely does the War College thing and sacrifices himself for his fellow cadets, but Bobby dies.
Rest in peace,
and
Bobby.
Poor old Lieutenant Tomov gets fired out the airlock.
After being eaten.
Yeah, after being eaten, while trying to save the students. I mean, the Academy sides had it easy. I mean, they just, sprained a knee playing friggin' Calica, and my guys are dying left, right, and center. So, I think
it has a toll on a person, though, doesn't it?
Yes, I really do. And I think that's partially why, again, you don't see Kelrec a lot after episode 6. But I think both he and Nala have been really changed by that incident. and some of the seriousness and the gravitas and that weight that people were yearning for in the beginning of the series, where people were a little bit like, what is this, man? Why isn't this like, where's the Captain Kirk vibe in all of this? It's like, if you think about a story being told over ideally 4 seasons, if you think about these young cadets' journey being shown over 40 hours instead of 10, then everybody needs to change and grow, and they need to start from a place where they're not fully formed. Otherwise, we have no story of how they got better at what they do.
One of the things Jodie and I spoke about on our sister show, 10 Forward, was how exceptional the character growth has been on season 1 of Starfleet Academy. And you look at where the cadets are, and not just the cadets. You look at where RK was. You look at where Kelrec was, where they were in episode 1 to where they are in episode 10. The journey has been immense.
A lot of television, a sitcom, a character is not actually supposed to change. We're supposed to see the character stay the same.
Simpson has stayed 12 years old for 35 years. Yeah,
and we have the circumstance they're in be the thing that's different, but the characters don't grow and develop, which can be the hard thing about doing a half hour or a sitcom, is that like your character basically stays the same. Yeah. In a show like this, it is more of a drama, so the growth and development of the characters, the changes they go through, if we look at it with the cadets as a kind of coming of age story, but if it's sort of a coming of age story for everybody, in a way. I mean, I think of it for Kelrec, he's having to figure out how to exist in a new age. And for him, the new age is Starfleet Academy is the future, and the War College, to some degree, is the past, or is not going to be the main show in town.
Yeah.
And I think for him, that's underneath everything that is in him. That's underneath all of his interactions and journey, is he was used to being the main show in town, and now he's not. And for anybody, that's hard.
Now he's the backup act, isn't he?
Yeah, your business gets taken over by a bigger business, and the new boss comes in, and they say, "Hey, here's your new coworker, and you're going to share responsibility." I mean, it gets very hard. So that was always a fun thing to have in the story as well, because there was always something to play there for me and think about, whether it was part of the scene or not, which is like, how does he feel about the War College? How does he feel about his place in it? How does he feel about how Nala is at this moment? How does he feel that Vance is including him or not including him? How does he feel? There's a lot there to play, and so for me, it's been very, very rewarding and interesting.
Well, do you think then? I know you can't tell us a lot about season 2, but is Kelrec going to join the Doctor's Opera Society? Is there going to be a Kelrec and the Doctor duet in the future?
Right? What was amazing is that my respect for Bob even grew, because I saw him learn and choreograph that whole opera section. I mean, you as the viewer just see sections of it.
Yeah,
right.
Bob all day ran that thing, figured it all out with the great opera singer he was working with, the woman who performs as a real opera singer.
Yep.
And he had it choreographed, his movements, repeated it. I watched him do that, and I was like, this guy, like, I had my moment. He had that moment when I did the dinner scene. I watched him, and I was like, holy smokes, this guy really knows what he's doing, because not only is he singing, he is the voice. He's singing that opera. That's him singing it.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't get an opera singer to do it. Bob singing it. And he figured out, I was like, when did you guys figure out all the choreography? And he's like, well, we met today and we started working on it. I was like, this wasn't like I thought that had been like a week-long rehearsal somewhere else that I hadn't seen. No, he's incredible. So yeah, Kelrec joins the Operatic Society.
Okay, good.
And no, I can't say a word about season 2 because I'll be fired and I'll never be on season 3.
Right,
but no,
we can't have that.
It's exciting. I mean, I think the show grows. The scripts are good. we continue seeing our cadets. I mean, it's a lot about how our cadets continue to grow, and I mean, I think that's kind of the point.
Now I have a really important question. Hang on.
Yeah.
Do you know who Specialist Krebs is, and do you know what's going on with this Talaxian furfly?
All Stephen Colbert-related material was added after the fact.
Damn it.
But if that kid's in the War College, he's doing push-ups for a year. Evidently, he's causing all kinds of trouble all the time with this damn creature.
All right.
So, it was very cool. When we did the premiere in New York, my wife came with me, and it was a great experience. And really, the blue carpet in New York was the first time I was at all publicly associated with this project. I was not announced in the trades. I was not on IMDb. People who I know knew because it had been 18 months. And the trades and some of the other shows I was working on, people were like, hey, man, why are you going? Why aren't you here for the whole shoot? And I'm like, well, I'm on Star Trek. And so I have to leave now. So there were people who knew, but it was not public news. So the blue carpet in New York was my first opportunity to actually basically share with the world that I was on this thing, which was incredible. But Stephen Colbert was there, and we were in the green room after, just before we did the group photo and all that. And my wife was like, oh, wow. And he was there with his son. And I was like, I'm going to have to do it. I'm going to have to get a selfie with Stephen Colbert. Yeah. I'm in this thing. At this stuff, you're supposed to be so cool, right? You're supposed to be like, hey, Stephen, how it's going? And I was like, he hadn't seen me in it. I was like, he'll have no idea who I am. But I was like, you're supposed to be just so cool. And so I talked to him for about 30 seconds. And he's like, oh, great. Yeah, super nice guy. And then I was like, can my wife and I get a selfie with you, please? And he was like, yeah, sure, come on. Yeah, no problem. So yeah, that was my, but yeah, Colbert was, that was all after the fact and added in. He wasn't on set while we were shooting. So that was, all that Colbert stuff for me is still a treat. I'm like, what's that? Oh, that's funny, or that's good.
We literally during 10 Forward, we were progressively getting more worried about Specialist Krebs and whatever was going on with this furfly, because every week it was something new.
Every week
it was brilliant. So the next podcast is going to be the Krebs Report.
Yes.
Not the Krebs Report.
No, that's a different thing.
No, that's a different thing altogether. So what was the atmosphere like on set? Because those sets are stunning.
Yeah, it's the biggest thing I've ever biggest anything I've ever seen. Really, I've never been on a show that took up 3.5 sound stages. The Pinewood Stage 4, where the Athena Atrium is. It's like a football field, and that is the set in a football field. No imagination required when you get to walk around in these costumes and these props and these sets, and it's a real tribute to the craftspeople who create the show and have worked on Star Trek in Toronto for 10 years. A lot of the same, it's a job that retains people. People who work on this show want to keep working on it. Obviously because it's a great job, but it's a very creative job for everybody. Lighting gets to do cool stuff. Props gets to do amazing stuff. Mario, our props master, just makes incredible stuff all the time. You're like, oh, like the weird alien flute that I play. Mm-hmm. He handed it to me. He's known me a long time. He's another guy from the scene who I've known a long time. He handed it to me, and I was like, oh, does it make any noise? And he's like, no, it doesn't play. And I was like,
just want to bet.
And I got to the point where I was making such horrible noise out of it. At one point, Holly Hunter was like, can you... Sorry.
Just stop.
I know you're helping me get in character, but I think you have, please stop. And so what you hear is not me, but I'll tell you, I got friggin' notes out of that thing. So no, it's, it's great. We have such a beautiful place to work. But again, I would say like my other show with Alex, there's something to be said for creating an environment that's, despite the hours, the crew the hours the crews have to work on these shows. They're so huge. The weeks are so long. The hours are so long. And, you know, Olatunde is an incredible producing director. You know, Alex, Noga, you know, there's very good leadership on that show. So the vibe is good. And also, you know, Holly, I think, has really stepped into a leadership position on the show. She's setting an amazing example for the young actors in terms of their preparation, their focus, their dedication. I mean, if she's not failing or waning at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, day 6 of shooting, into the 6th day of shooting, you know, how can a 20-year-old be like, I'm tired? You know, like she's incredible. She has incredible energy and focus and dedication. And you kind of see like, oh yeah, that's how you get nominated for an Oscar 3 times, is you basically work that hard. And I found that with some of the greats I've had the chance to work with, you know, Sam Waterston, Jessica Chastain, John Lithgow, like you watch those people and there's almost a simplicity to how they work because they just have incredible energy and focus. Even some of them, you know, who would be older than me, you know, they don't waste a lot of extraneous energy on other stuff. Like Sam Waterston when we did Miss Sloane together. I mean, he read the newspaper, he folded the newspaper, he walked on set, he knocked it out of the park. He came back. He wasn't like, let me tell you the story, and oh my God, I need to, you know, it's like there's a focus to it. And Holly is Holly's kind of more fun in a way, but her energy, I don't know where she gets it from, and it's incredible. So the vibe generally is good. I mean, people get tired and all that, but listen, man, we're making a giant TV show that the whole world is seeing. Like, there's lots of times to as an actor, you have lots of times to catch up on your sleep and your rest when you're unemployed.
Sleep when you're dead. There you go.
Yeah, and even sooner when you're unemployed. So, but you know, Kelrec doesn't have the same schedule that some of the actors have. Like some of those kids are in. You know, they have some very heavy episodes where they're in all the time. And you know, Star Trek is a show you're not allowed to complain on at all if you don't have to wear prosthetics. Mm-hmm. Because the prosthetics people,
hours and hours.
Kareem, Gina, Bella, Bella's is shorter time in the chair. But, you know, they're in hours before I even show up. I'm asleep for hours before I have to get up and go, and they've already been sitting in the chair. So it's not, and also, you know, it's hot, it's uncomfortable, it can irritate your skin, and, you know, they look amazing. All the prosthetics look great, and I mean, Laura Thok as a character, Jayden as a character, like that prosthetic element gives them so much. It does so much, you know. They're totally different looking people because of those prosthetics. So, but if you get to appear in your human form, and it's just a matter of a little bit of, now they spend a lot of time on me. Don't get me wrong. You know, I don't roll out of bed and they're like, I mean, I have never had anybody work so much on my hair. I've never had so many different plans and details on my makeup. But still, it's a fraction of what other people have to put up with. So I like to say that on Star Trek Starfleet Academy, and maybe this is part of my, you know, Mike, you'll appreciate my northern roots as being born in England. I basically approach it like you hear Ringo Starr when they asked him how he was to be in the how it felt to be in the Beatles, and he would just say, "I'm just happy to be here." Yeah. I'm like, Ringo, man, I'm just happy to be here. Any day I'm on set is a gift, generally speaking. Yep. And any day I'm on Starfleet Academy is an amazing opportunity that I try not to take for granted. And, you know, as long as you're not injured or sick or exhausted from something in your life or family issue or whatever, like, it's amazing. It's amazing.
What's it like then? I mean, you've had a very active career spanning stage and TV and, you know, kind of a little bit of everything. Star Trek's a little bit different when it comes to as a franchise and fandom. So what's been your reaction to being a part of this kind of bigger universe now and getting fan reactions to your work?
Well, Starfleet Academy has also managed to be a football in the Western world's culture war. Really,
Yes.
right? And I have never been on a show that's had the richest man in the world comment on it, or a central advisor to the White House comment on it. Like
Even though
that
their
is,
comments are wrong. Just saying.
Right.
so that part of it has been surreal. The part of the commentary about Starfleet Academy that is about that intersects with conversations around DEI and all that stuff, like that has been very weird, really, and unlike any other show I've been on. Of course, I mean, you could almost argue that there hasn't really been a conversation about a TV show in the modern era quite like this one. Also, how depending sort of where you are in the digital world and the social media world, it sort of reflects differently on how the show is responded to. Like if you're on Twitter, it can be a very negative reaction to the show because it's a more kind of like become more of a right-wing space.
Yep.
And then if you're on Facebook, it's like a much more positive vibe to the show, and particularly one that's gotten more positive as we've got to the end of the season. So I've not engaged in it, but I've observed it almost as part cultural study as opposed to being really desperately tied to my self-worth. Because I've just never been a part of anything kind of like this. So there's a part of me that's like, oh, I'm interested. If there was a way to gauge how people are reacting to it, why not kind of take advantage of that possibility? At the same time, it's the bit like playing with a loaded gun. As an actor, you have to be careful that, like reading your own reviews, good or bad,
Yep.
you have to be careful that you don't let that influence you. And I feel particularly for the younger actors on the show who are where social media is so much a part of their life
Yeah.
that I hope if there's been negative things, they've been able to embrace the giant wave of positive things that also come from these spaces. And I think hearing from Gina, her experience of being on the Star Trek cruise, for example, I think she was completely blown away by the vibe and the positivity around it and her work and the show and just the welcoming that she felt for being a part of this thing, this bigger thing that's been around for 60 years. That's great. And I mean, so I haven't really had that experience yet. I'm just dipping my toe into the whole
Wait till you've
bigger
done your
world.
first convention.
Yeah, and I hope to do some, and that's sort of on the horizon, but I'm also not in a huge rush because I think there's a lot of people to meet on our show.
Yeah.
And I think the more people get to know Kelrec, and hopefully if we do a third season, and hopefully if I'm in that third season, there'll be
When there's a third season. No, hopefully
yes, I
when
like
there's
that.
a third season.
I just don't want to be quoted in some article. Actor guarantees third season. Like that's what
We'll
I've
just say
also.
Mike and Jody said it's okay.
Yeah.
We won't put it on you.
Yeah, I mean, I feel but again, like there's so many forces at play in regards to even a season 3. I mean, as some of your viewers will know, Alex Kurtzman's deal with Paramount is up for renewal, and there's all these different things that are. Sorry, why the hell am I getting so many emails? There's all these factors at play that I wish I could say to you, like, no, I don't know if it is coming back or not.
Right.
But honestly, I can tell you that in any conversations I've had with anyone involved with the show, I've had no real indication in either direction.
Yeah.
And what I do know from last go round is that when we get a third season, please, a long process of writing and development has to happen.
Yeah.
And then someone's going to call me and say, yeah, you're in season 3. And then someone's going to call me after that and say, and you're probably in these episodes. And then someone's going to call me and say, it starts work on this day. And hopefully I'll be around and available to do all that they need. So it's such a long way off that part that now we're sort of in a time to kind of, I'm in a period where I can sort of participate more and take it in more. And also I think now that the whole first series season is out, now it's also an opportunity to kind of like, look a bit more at what the reaction is to it and how people are feeling about it without it worrying too much like, oh my God, somebody said this and now I got to go act today and it's going to affect my work. I mean, I've been around long enough. I've had some terrible reviews as an actor in all kinds of quarters, and I've had some amazing reviews. And also what I've learned about Star Trek, which has been really interesting, and I sort of knew this coming in, but, you know, even in the online commentary and in the different podcasts and shows, and, you know, it's been good for me to participate by watching some of it, is that, you know, you realize that people want very different things from it.
Yeah.
And you can't kind of necessarily give everybody what they want because people want such a different thing. Like the number of people who have said, you know, I'm really disappointed that it didn't have more classroom lectures. And I'm like, I get it in a way, but I'm also like, there's also perhaps a much larger contingent of human beings who would be like, why did I watch a 10-minute science lecture in this show? Like, I don't care. I want to know about the people and their dynamic, and also all these shows. When I've been going back and looking at them, we're all creatures of the age that we're being made in, and so you can't really make a 1995 show in 2026 because the world is different and television is different and narrative is different and the expectations. I mean, if you tried to, I mean, again, I'm not going to be too tough on 17-year-olds, but if you took a phone away from a 17-year-old and you put them in front of a movie from 1975 and you said, watch this, I mean, some of them would go into kind of a deep shock. They'd be like, why isn't it cutting? Why are all the shots so wide? Why is it so slow? You know? And so as much as I admire what came before, I'm also a little sad when people love the franchise, but then say like they haven't liked anything since 1995. I'm kind of like, I mean, I get it because it's like that in other franchises, right? Like it's like that in Star Wars, you know, the reaction that fans have had to Rings of Power. Like I get that. I totally get it. I'm probably more of a Tolkien person than anything, you know, in terms of the franchises. Like I like Star Wars a lot, but I didn't engage with a lot of the new shows and Star Trek I've talked about. But, you know, Lord of the Rings, loved the books, read all the books, watched all the movies, watched all the Hobbit films, had a friend who was one of the dwarfs, like from New Zealand, Peter Hamilton, who I'd worked with at Shakespeare's Globe. So I loved watching the Hobbit movies and be like, oh my God, there's Peter in a Hobbit movie. My friend Tanya Moody is in Rings of Power as one of the Harfoots that they kind of meet later on. So like that part of it has been amazing. But I know I was like, oh wow, here they are doing like a new take on Lord of the Rings. How do I feel about that? What does it mean? So like I totally get all of that. But I guess I just feel that really as the actor, like for the actor, even less than the writer, we're really interpreting what we're given. And that's our job, is to make what we get on the page as alive and as interesting as it needs to be. And my job, to sort of circle back, my overall job in the universe as a storyteller is to tell the story of Star Trek that I've been handed. You know, that's my job. Try to make it work, make sense for me, and make it interesting. So some of those bigger conversations that fans are having are totally valid, but they don't really have that much to do with me.
Right.
In another way, right? Like they don't.
Right.
But I love that people care.
Yeah, and I hope that, and I'm sure Mike feels this way too, but I hope you get that opportunity to get out there and meet fans face to face, because I think you're going to see a much bigger positive impact than what you get from social media. And so yes, I hope we get to see you at some cons and things where you're meeting these folks.
Just start asking for me, and then my
yes.
then the agent who books me will say, yeah, they do actually want you. So just ask for me. Where the hell is Kelrec? I've got a friend who's taken the Star Trek cruise for 6 years, and he was starting a campaign on this year's cruise. They're like, Kelrec has got to get on this thing. So he was subplotting with people. So yeah, like I said, I'm sure it'll happen. I hope it'll happen. I look forward to doing them. And someone said to me like, "Oh, like, would you be okay meeting fans?" And I was like, I've spent my entire life playing in nightclubs for 60 to 200 people. Like, all I do is say, "Oh, hey, how are you? Where are you from? What do you do?" Like, that's my entire life. And I know I haven't lived in some kind of bubble where, like, I know as much as anybody that people coming through the door are what keep us doing what we do. You know, I heard a story once about, which I think is an era that's kind of gone by in modern showbiz. There's a story I heard of, you know, like Bing Crosby and Dean Martin or something being at the Canadian National Exhibition here in Toronto, the 50s, and how there was one day, like, this happens in the height of the summer, like every August, and it's happened for 120 years or whatever. But there was a story someone told me, and it was like they signed autographs for 12 hours in the sun in 1950, whatever, you know, and they're like the biggest stars in the world at that time.
Yeah.
And you know, you hear those stories of people with their Hollywood publicists back in those days, and people would literally have, like, they'd have fan letters back from Sinatra, they'd have signed photos from all these people. And I kind of think the interesting thing about the convention circuit is that it's sort of hearkening back to kind of a time where that's what we as entertainers did. That we put time in our lives to acknowledge the people who wanted to meet us. And there was always an acknowledgement in the era of the entertainer and the ticket buyer that we had an obligation to that. And I think as the years went on and independent films became a thing and movie stars weren't really about being entertainers, it was more about being actors and telling these difficult stories, that sort of became kind of gauche. And I'll admit, like, I was like, you know, 10 years ago, I was like, man, I wouldn't do any of these conventions. Like, that's not for me. I'm not that kind of actor. I don't do that stuff. And then I saw a clip of Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen at San Diego Comic-Con. And I was like, revise. Immediately revise Notion. Delete.
I retract this statement.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I was like, well, if those guys are doing it, of course, that's part of the job, and that's actually part of the experience. And it's part of our responsibility. You know, of course, people aren't doing those for free. I mean, some people do them and donate all that money to charity. People have all kind of other reasons and ways they do it. But it's also a component of how people make their living, which is fine.
Right.
But it's also, you know, it is also about, I think, trying to engage with people who are interested in what you do. And the fact that if this show allows me to have people want to come see me do a solo Hamlet, or come see me hear my music, or watch me on another show, or see me in another play, or watch a TV show I create, like, what an amazing opportunity to try to build people who might have interest in what you do. Because without an audience, you're acting in front of a mirror, or you're singing in front of a mirror, and it's far less interesting, trust me.
Right.
Absolutely. So you've built a career that kind of refuses to stay in one lane. Was that always intentional?
Look,
Was that a happy accident?
Well, it kind of was a bit out of necessity. I learned kind of early on when I left theater school, I really believed, as one should, that, you know, I could play any role, be in any kind of thing, ready to take on the world. And then when I got into the business, I realized, there's kind of a limit of parts that I'm allowed audition for a number of different reasons. But one of them was being, you know, this half Indian, half Irish guy with a strange last name. You know, in the era I came up in, you can kind of count on your hands the actors of my generation who really had any kind of career in the West.
Yeah.
You know? My friend Jimmy Mystery, who's basically doesn't act anymore and is a DJ and baker and got a cool reality show that he does online. Cal Penn, who's one of the great American actors, but who also took time off to go work in Obama's White House. And if he'd been making Marvel movies, he probably wouldn't have done that. Kumail, who I tested with for an NBC pilot in 2010, and was a stand-up who was like, yeah, I'm kind of getting into acting now, and yeah, it's cool. Like, we'll see what happens. And now he's like one of the biggest actors in the world. I've intersected with those people. Those are 3 guys I've worked with who are my contemporaries and of the same vintage. And there's a whole bunch of others who've tried, and we've gotten as far as we've gotten, or we've had as much opportunity as we've had. So some of it came from the fact that I think I knew I was going to be a little bit limited in my, for all the work I've done. I knew when it came to leading roles, I was probably going to be a little bit limited in my access, particularly when I started. Also because I was an unknown. Like every unknown starts as an unknown.
Got to start somewhere.
And I had some great opportunities early in my career. I did a movie called Extraordinary Visitor. It was the first film I ever did. I was the lead in that. That was a Canadian independent film. That set me off in a great place to get more opportunities in television in Canada and movies. But yeah, when I started, I guess I thought, I guess I'll, hey, maybe I'll be a movie star. That'll be cool. And when I did that first movie, I was like, well, now I played the lead in a movie. And the contemporaries of mine at that age were Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. And I was like, oh, yeah, well, those guys are doing movies. Like, maybe I'll get to do movies like that, too. Cool. And then you realize, wait a second. You're this funny looking beige guy. You're based in Canada. You're not legally allowed work in the U.S. yet. You don't have a work visa. You don't have representation. You don't have access to Hollywood. Maybe I'll go to England. I didn't train in England while I could work there. I didn't go to RADA. I didn't go to Lambda. I didn't go to Guildhall. I didn't go to Central. So will I get even an audition for the Royal Shakespeare Company if I go, or will it just be like, there's some Canadian guy showed up? So I really realized I had to kind of create my own opportunities, and I don't like not doing stuff. So I've had a lot of friends say to me, I wish I could produce and self-create like you did. Like, I wish I could do that. Like, you're so good at it. I wish I could do that. And then some people have implied like, well, it's easy for you, so you can do it. And I'm sort of like, well, I don't mind doing it, but I wouldn't say it's easy, like to create all your own opportunities or a lot of your own opportunities. It's actually kind of hard, and it does sometimes suck. I enjoy it because I like doing my own thing. But, had I had other opportunities early in my career, like I think some of these young cadets have on Starfleet Academy, maybe my career would have gone in a different direction, and I wouldn't have explored so many different avenues. But, I might be more rich. I might be more famous. I might have been in bigger shows. I might have been more of a household name. But I'm pretty happy with how it's worked out despite that. Every person, not every actor, but I would say almost everybody who tries to get into TV and film, aspires to win an Academy Award, aspires to be in a giant movie, aspires to make money and gather fame, because the independent film world has kind of dissolved. Mm-hmm. When I started out, there were all these movies that were made, there were independent films that were made for handfuls of millions of dollars. There were studios made modestly budgeted $25 to $50 million movies. That was kind of like where you saw the Al Pacinos and the Robert De Niro's. They were in these sort of movies. And then as my career went on, television became the place where you made dramatic stuff, mm-hmm. and movies became blockbusters, and Marvel kind of took over movies. And so, it's only natural that it changes. My wife and I have this conversation all the time because I've been doing it 30 years. I'd say, well, yeah, what would it be like if you showed up to Hollywood in 1930, and then by 1960 you were like, man, boy, have things changed around here. Like, when you've been doing something for 30 years, of course it's going to change, and you need to change with it. 1996 to 2026, of course it's totally different. The world is completely different. Our business is completely different. So as an artist, you just have to kind of, and I really think the next 10 years is going to make things could be very different if we're having this conversation in 2036, God willing, we're all here. Like we could be looking back and going like, oh, remember when I was talking about this kind of thing and that thing? Well, that's been gone forever. So, as an artist, if you want to do this, you have to change with the times and change with what it is. And also, I have lots of friends who've left, who are kind of like, done enough of it, got to a certain point, happy with this, didn't get as far as I wanted, or got as far as I wanted, and I'm done with it. And I deeply admire people because I know how much people love it. You have to really love this to do it. So when people decide to step away from it, I know it costs them a lot, but I admire people who do it because it sometimes you kind of have to get off the train of delusion and go like, yeah, you know what? I'm done. This is not working for me. We have a visitor. Well, Mr. Snuggles, what have we got? Come on, give me a name.
This is Neelix, named after the Voyager character.
Oh my God! Hello, incredible. Of course, yeah. So
well, speaking of various lines in the industry, what's next for you?
I hope. Well, according to you, season 3, possibly season 4 of Star Trek,
and so season 5, 6, and 7. Don't get it wrong.
Thanks for letting me know. That's great. I'm thrilled. I can do that home renovation now. Perfect. I can afford it. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I am in a little bit of a holding pattern. I don't really want to rush out and try to get another great job that would make me unavailable to be on Star Trek. So on one level, I like pretty much everybody working on Starfleet Academy is waiting to find out the fate of our show, if it's coming back, when it's coming back, what capacity. We're all very hopeful, and I think we'd love to all do it more, and we feel good about it. And season 2 is great, I think, and different and exciting, and we've learned from it, I think, too. So, and I think season 3 would be even better because now there's more fan reaction. There's more. And when I say data, I don't mean logarithmic data, even though I'm sure that's a factor. But there's just more feedback from the world about what people liked, who people liked, what people responded to, and that would be a great thing to have to build the season 3. I'm playing a lot of music right now because I found in season 1, I had a bunch of stuff previously booked that I had to still do while I was shooting Starfleet, and I found it a bit hard to do both at the same time. So this season, once I knew I was doing it, I was doing The Trades, my other show, at the same time. Thank God both shows let me do both shows, but I had that to kind of contend with, and then after that, I kind of took it easy. I'm hoping to do my solo Hamlet for a fundraiser in Toronto in the fall, possibly. I've got quite a bit of music coming up. I'm developing a television show that I've been working on for a number of years with some writers that we are just about to take out to start pitching to networks to see if we could shoot. That would be incredible if that started to move forward, because then we'd start, we'd get some money to start writing it and developing it and seeing if we could really turn it into a show. Getting a TV show made, like an absolute miracle. I think, it's hard for people to understand how many people are trying and how few spots there are in the grand universe of streaming and television and your national broadcasters and your little cable channels. And it's so rare to get something made.
So I have a friend who literally creates TV shows and sells them. And it's the amount of stuff that he has to do to jump through hoops to get a meeting or just to get someone to look at something. It's nuts.
And stuff will get sold and never made. Yeah. But you'll sell the idea, you'll sell the scripts, it'll move closer. But to actually be on day one of a series, I've been doing it long enough now that when you're day one on a new series and the cameras are rolling, you just have to take a deep breath and go like, wow, And it's harder and harder these days to make stuff that isn't attached to previous IP, that isn't based on another thing, because the corporate forces that are involved in making everything now are risk averse. Of course, occasionally they're deeply rewarded by it, but even a Canadian show that's gone crazy like Heated Rivalry, I mean, it's based on a set of books. Of basic sort of romance, smutty gay romance novels. So, even that had previous IP, which is like our hottest Canadian TV export. Everybody pitching every TV show in Canada is like, it'll be a show about, Father Christmas and how he finds the elves to make sure the toys are delivered. And people in the pitch will be like, it has elements of Heated Rivalry to it.
Sold.
Every show is like Heated Rivalry right now. So yeah, those are kind of the things. And hopefully, because a season 3 of Star Trek won't start until scripts are written, there definitely is an opportunity to work on some other stuff this calendar year for sure. So just interested to see, does being on the show so far make any difference? Do I have access to parts that I didn't have before?
Oh, sure.
That's always a factor for actors, and that's one of the things about being on a higher profile show is that you then become if you ever get mentioned in the trades, I imagine for a while I'll be mentioned as, it'll say Raoul Bhaneja, Starfleet Academy. That's what happens. They look at your biggest credit, your most recent biggest credit, and you're sort of tied to that. So that'll be interesting to see. And I'm kind of curious between my work in the US and my work here and internationally, do I have access to some other stuff, or, do I sit at home twiddling my thumbs waiting because I turn a bunch of stuff down because I don't want to do that show and I don't want to do this show and that. So we'll see. But I honestly have no idea. And I imagine you sort of find in show business that it never makes as much of a difference as you hope, whatever it is. You kind of think, oh my God, I've been in this movie. Now everything will change. And you're like, no, it's moderate. There's been a moderate dip, but it's not like all of a sudden, I won't be having my own whiskey line and my own cologne line.
Oh, sure.
Raoul Bhaneja scent. No, you won't be saying that anytime.
But I'm really interested in a Raoul Bhaneja single malt or something. That sounds cool.
Yeah, well, that's it. Everybody's got you get to a certain level. Everyone's got their own cologne and their own alcohol. So I don't anticipate getting there anytime soon. But I guess that'll be a good problem if it does happen.
It does. That's right.
So we have 2 questions left. Jody, do you want to do the second to last one?
Sure. So just kind of taking a different track, if you will. What does home feel like to you? Is it a place, a feeling? Is it a person?
Generally, it's when I'm in the proximity of my family, wherever that is. When we've lived in Los Angeles, it's having my family nearby. When we've lived in Toronto, it's having my family nearby. As a performer, you're kind of itinerant. Even if you'll hear movie stars who are making tons of money, and often they'll say the hardest thing is that, for 7 months of the year, that year they weren't around their kids as much, their family as much. And also as your kids get older, they're not as portable. You're not, you do potentially more damage to your kids when you bring them somewhere when they're 14 compared to when they're 4. And I've spent a lot of time away. My kids, my wife has been away at different times because she's an actor too. She shot in the UK. She's toured theater, worked out of town. So yeah, I think for us, it's pretty much, when the family's together, it doesn't almost matter kind of where it is. But yeah, I mean, I've basically been primarily in Los Angeles, or I've been in Toronto. That's basically been the last 25 years. I first went out to LA with that film, Extraordinary Visitor I did. It was in the very first Dances with Films film festival, and it won Best Feature. I keep thinking it was 2000, but a friend of mine said, I'm pretty sure that was 1999. So I've been a year off. But yeah, basically since that was the first time I ever went to LA, and I was like, oh wow, okay, this is what this place is. And I started trying to figure out, okay, how do I end up out here? How do I work here? How do I, and that sort of began that process. But yeah, and now that my kids are older, we're all around each other less. They have their own lives. My daughter's off in a different part of the country in university. My son's a teenager, going to high school, doing all his stuff. So yeah, that's pretty much the answer.
Yeah, perfect.
So we have one final question then. So Star Trek this year turns 60.
Incredible.
Mad, isn't it? And now that you're part of the new chapter, what does Star Trek mean to you?
You know what's been interesting is my dad was never much of a Trekkie at all. Like all of us, he'd seen it pop up on TV. I mean, my dad came to Canada in 1965 from via Germany. He'd left India in 1963. My dad ended up in Canada in 1965. So, you know, he would have been around when original series was originally popping up on people's screens. And my dad, you know, kind of had this wild career as a Canadian civil servant. Then he became a Canadian diplomat. That's how I ended up in Germany. And it's been cool because in my dad's retirement, he's got involved a lot in the peace movement. And he's part of the Pugwash group. He's part of a group of the Scientists for Peace. He's worked a lot on nuclear non-proliferation. And nonviolence movements. That's been a big thing for my dad. So it's been very interesting talking to my dad as he's watched season 1 of Starfleet Academy, and for someone who has had such an interest in science and political science and peace and the peace movement, and for him to intersect with the Roddenberry world for the first time on this level, and for him to be struck by the core messages of Roddenberry's world and universe, and how much of the Star Trek ethos is around some of those things that he believes. Mm-hmm. Debate, discussion, diplomacy over war, over conflict. Phasers are set to stun, not kill, right? That's like my dad's whole thing. There's a whole movement in political science that's called the non-killing movement, which is literally like, we have to find a way where we don't kill each other.
Yep.
Like, it's not like, well, in war we're allowed, but war is the last resort. It's like, no, like, what if we had a world where we just tried not to kill each other ever? And we tried to resolve everything without the killing of other people. There's a guy who was based out of Hawaii, Glenn Page, who that was really his movement. And my dad became a big follower of his and worked with Glenn. So that to me has been very special because it sort of helped bring into perspective to me how valuable and how interesting those core values are. And despite whatever version of Star Trek you like, or you think is good, or that you compare this show to that show too. So say you think Starfleet Academy is an absolute abomination in the history of Star Trek.
Well, you're wrong for a start.
And it's violated everything that you believe about Star Trek. You're that guy. Probably a guy. But or you're that girl. Fine. What's cool about my dad watching it is that those core values are totally there. Particularly for someone who's uninitiated and doesn't compare it to all these other things. And when you look at what is the core thing that makes Star Trek so different from so many other shows, space adventure, historical drama, you know, that's been really cool for me because it's reminded me that, like, that's just in the DNA of the 60 years of all the stuff that's made. And it's been really cool to have my dad kind of go like, wow, you know, I didn't know that this TV show thing kind of was also about that, and that there's people watching it now, and that there's people who followed it for 60 years who share those beliefs through a cultural property, not through a university lecture, not through a protest, and that there are people with really divergent political views from all over the world, but that one of the things that unifies people in this is that some of those core values that are in Star Trek are really laudable ones for humanity. And so for me, that's been a really beautiful thing.
Perfect.
Raoul, thank you very much for joining us this week. This has been, well, you asked how long we were going to be, and I said, oh, it could be anything up to 3 hours. We're nearly at 3 hours, so
No,
we're doing well.
No,
We are.
please tell me. No wonder I'm getting texts. My kids are like,
People are going, where are you?
have you been captured? Have the Klingons captured you and taken you to their planet for interrogation? What
Well,
the
now
hell?
they have a planet, I suppose. That's always a win.
Yeah, they do. Finally. In fact, the guy who plays her Klingon boyfriend, David Keeley, who's such a fantastic Canadian actor. Would my son stop texting me? I'm in the middle of a 3-hour podcast. Why don't you understand? Stop! This is, there was a time when you would text kind of like a thought, like a full thought, and then you'd press send.
Yeah. No,
Now
it's 5 words. Yeah.
Would like, send. It's like, no, please, for the love of Lucifer. Okay.
Raoul, thank you so much for joining us this week. For
I
everyone
was
watching
about
and
to tell you
listening,
some other crazy story. Okay, my gig on Sunday that I'm doing, the guy who plays her Klingon boyfriend will probably be at that gig. He's an amazing actor, David Keeley. You can see him in Waiting for Godot at the Stratford Festival this summer. He's one of our great actors in Canada, and I thought he was awesome in that part. So I'm just plugging someone else for a second. I mean, if it's 3 hours, maybe I can spend 10 seconds talking about someone else besides me.
absolutely.
Always.
For everyone watching and listening at home, remember you can catch up with more of us here at the Clonestar Podcast, at our website, clonestarpodcast.com, on all the socials, the YouTube, Instagram, and everything else, as well as obviously all the podcast platforms as well. Remember, be brave, be bold, and boldly go.